Times reported that a preliminary investigation said outdated information may have resulted in the Tomahawk missile strike. FSN's Simon Marks reports from Washington.
U.S. officials familiar with the findings of the investigation say the strike on the elementary school was an American error. It was built on the grounds of a former base for the Revolutionary Guards in Manab in the south of the country and was incorrectly listed as a military target. President Trump has previously claimed the Iranians were responsible for the Tomahawk strike, but there's no evidence to support that claim, and the probe's outcome will boost calls for the U.S. to face war crimes charges over the killing of more than 100 children and teachers as the war began.
Some Asian airlines raised fears and added fuel surcharges as the Middle East conflict is driving up jet fuel costs and disrupting travel. The war has disrupted a key oil export corridor, driving up airline costs and pushing up ticket prices amid concerns about a broader impact on travel demand. FSN's Laura Westbrook reports from Hong Kong.
Thousands of flights have been cancelled since Israel and the United States attacked Iran at the end of last month. The war has caused restrictions on operations at key transfer hubs in the Middle East. There are fewer seats available after major Gulf carriers suspended flights, and that's contributing to ticket prices going up between Asia and Europe. Spiking fuel prices are also putting pressure on carriers. Australia's Qantas and Air New Zealand were among the carriers that announced price increases, while Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific says it's adding flights to London and Zurich as airspace closures and capacity constraints drive up airfares.
Those were some of the week's top stories. Ira Spitzer reports.
According to a study released Thursday by the Princeton University Department of Biology, this local 2-year-old woodland chipmunk has crafted a far more secure and dependable plan for the future than 8 out of 10 Americans. Reporters spoke to citizens to get their view on the study.
Clearly, this chipmunk is pretty impressive. I mean, he wakes up every morning and says, I need to collect acorns and berries for the winter. He sets goals for himself and he gets it done.
He has to make a burrow in a tree stump. That's exactly what he does. He doesn't pause and have a snack and lay around for a few hours.
Out of nearly 40 separate interviews with Americans, 33 told reporters they were very impressed by the chipmunk's continued display of foresight, personal responsibility, and pragmatic decision-making when considering his own future.
He's preparing for winter, he's building a home, and he's trying to get enough nutrients to make it throughout the rest of the day. All this while being worried about maybe getting eaten by a wolf or an owl or something. Earlier this week, the electricity went off my home because I forgot to pay my bill. It's the second time this year.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, it's Mark Edge, and I have with me a longtime friend of the show, Scott Horton. Scott, are you there?
I'm here. How are you doing?
All's well. Now, you used to be the host of Anti-War Radio, but I think you're just still affiliated with them, but it's called the Scott Horton Show, right?
Yeah, I kept the name Anti-War Radio for my show on KPFK in Los Angeles, which I quit sometime last year. So I'm not really on the radio anymore, so no point in like pretending and calling it that. It's just the Scott Horton Show, which is the name of what my podcast has been, because my radio show is basically the best interview of the week from the Scott Horton Show that I was doing all along anyway. So I've got 6,000 interviews at scotthorton.org if people want to go and listen to them all.
I'm with you on this one. I don't want to be cruel to my radio stations out there, but I really feel like COVID kicked radio right in the teeth. It may not be dead, but it isn't doing well.
Yeah, it's a lot of factors. It's very rare that I would ever listen to the radio in my truck, for example. I did have my old favorite morning show on the FM rock station, but they fired the guy who was actually interesting and kept some losers. So shout out to Dale Dudley out there, but Bob Fonseca, screw you, man.
And speaking of your truck, I don't think I don't want people to get I don't even know how to describe you, because you're very difficult to describe. You're a libertarian, like me, but I mean, you're wearing a Bass Pro Shop hat. You drive a truck.
No, this is a bug assault hat. This is assault shotgun for murdering flies with.
It's awesome. I have one.
Yeah. Go to scotthorton.org and click the Amazon link in the right-hand margin there, and it'll lead you right to the Bug Assault 3.0. You got to get the 3.0 because it has the bar safety. But the 2.0, you got to flip the safety every dang time you shoot, and it's a real pain.
I had the early version, and it just didn't propel the salt quite quickly enough to make sure
with
that...
the 3.0, you got it made, man.
Yeah.
That's lots of fun.
That's good news.
The best
I'm
thing
glad.
is when you get them out of the air, and then they slam against the far wall. And
that is rare.
And I taught my dog to eat them so that the last thing that they know is a gigantic monster coming to eat them. Like there's some, hero in old gladiator movie taking on a giant beast. Which is always fun because I hate flies. I hate them so
They're
much.
Disgusting. They're foul, disgusting creatures.
That's right. So
I understand that they're necessary.
Shoot them and feed salty flies to your dog.
I understand they're necessary for the circle of life, but the circle of life goes on outside of my house. Any of them come inside of my house, they are dead to the world.
That's right. So listen, I'm just a guy with a skateboard and a salt shotgun. That's all.
But you are, in my opinion, the single best person to talk to about U.S. foreign policy. And I haven't moved on that opinion for about 15 years. Now, I'm not saying I offload my foreign policy opinion to Scott Horton, but if you used that sentence as a guidepost, then you'd be close enough to the truth. The fact is that you do way more of this investigation than I do on foreign policy stuff. So I listen to your show. I come to you just sort of mentally to find out. And right now it looks like the United States is once again sharpening the bayonet, looking to plunge it into yet another non-nuclear state in order to keep us free, distract from the Epstein files. I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, look, I won't go back too many steps. Let's just say that since October the 7th and the Israelis launching what they call their 7-front war here, that Iran is the big one. And, if you go back to the early 2000s, Ariel Sharon insisted that W. Bush attack Tehran. And then Ehud Olmert did as well after Sharon was in his coma, at least, if not dead. And his protege, Ehud Olmert, took over. He insisted that Bush attack Iran, and Bush told him no. And then Netanyahu came in, and he browbeat the hell out of Obama and threatened to start the war and drag America in kicking and screaming. You might remember Zbigniew Brzezinski, he of Rockefeller fame, basically the Democratic Henry Kissinger, told Obama, if the Israelis try to attack Iran, you should shoot their jets down over Iraq, which caused a huge controversy. But people were really worried that Netanyahu was going to do it. Now, I believe, and I'm pretty sure I was good on this all along, that he was bluffing there. But it was...
Who was bluffing, Netanyahu or...
Yes. That he knew he couldn't really do the war without America on board, and he couldn't really blackmail the president by forcing the Ayatollah to attack American targets and then like that. If the president wasn't really willing to do it, that would... Yeah. So, anyway... Netanyahu, whatever. So the pressure on Obama was enough that what he decided to do was enter into the nuclear deal, which just all it did was it scaled back Iran's program significantly, although not completely. And it expanded inspections to double extra happy, lucky, wish, verify that they are definitely not enriching uranium to weapons grade and trying to make bombs out of it. And that was the deal. And that was the deal that Trump tore up in 2018. Now, and he did so at Netanyahu's behest. And the reason why was because that's the pretext for war. And Netanyahu wanted the pretext for war. So now skip a few and it's October the 7th. And now the excuse for Israel to do everything they can to finish wiping out the Palestinians of the Gaza Strip and also escalate all the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank as well. And at the same time, launch a massive war against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. They helped al-Qaeda, along with the Turks and the Americans, helped al-Qaeda take over Syria and sack Damascus in November and December of 2024. And, the Houthis in Yemen, yeah, they're friends with Iran, but they're not really, they're sock puppets and they have power to fire missiles and drones, but they don't have the ability to really project power outside of Yemen in any way. So they're a nuisance, but they're less of a threat than Hezbollah, for example. And Hezbollah is completely reeling. I don't know how well you and your audience follow this stuff, but over the last couple of years of Israel's war in Gaza, they also really, I don't know the percentage number, and I don't know how much they've recovered, but they killed Hezbollah's charismatic leader, a guy named Hassan Nasrallah. They killed him, and they did this brilliant, horrible, sneaky terrorist attack, pager attack, where they set off bombs in the pagers of a lot of like mid-level managers and fighters throughout Hezbollah, and really crippled their force to a significant degree. And the alleged Hezbollah missile threat to northern Israel was really nullified. I mean, I don't know if they just had great intel and bombed those missiles in their stores, or if they were always exaggerated in their numbers anyway. But the threatened rain of missiles from Hezbollah never did come. They were severely set back. As I said, the entire Assad regime in Damascus was overthrown. Now, you can't undo Iraq War II, which was at Netanyahu's behest and his men's behest. You can't undo the results of that, where America put the Shiites in power there. But you can help ameliorate those consequences, they imagine, if you just go ahead and take out the Ayatollah's regime in Iran. You know, although that relies on a completely false premise that somehow the Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani in Iraq is any more of a progressive and pro-Zionist figure than the Ayatollah Ali al-Khamenei in Iran, which is not true, right? And so he's the one who, after George Bush won the war for him, Sistani kicked his ass right out of there, right? So, anyway, from Netanyahu's point of view, everything is coming up Likud. He's got Hamas.
That's his political party.
Yes. Likud is the right-wing nationalist party in Israel. So yep. he's really severely crippled Hamas, right? Heard so much of a rocket fired out of there in a very long time. Not that they've been completely defeated, but they've been severely set back. Same for Hezbollah. Completely got rid of the Baathists in Syria. And now if they can get regime change in Iran, that's the royal flush or whatever. I don't play cards, but that's the big deal. Again, this is what Sharon and Olmert and Netanyahu have demanded and threatened all of this time. And so now the question is, so what does that mean about the nuclear program? The nuclear program is a pretext for war.
Pretext. The U.S.'s or Iran's?
No, America's and Israel's pretext for war against Iran. So
why do they keep doing it? Just out of curiosity, like if if your enemy has one particular thing that they really hate about you, and I'm not saying they're enriching uranium to weapons grade. I'm not saying that. I'm just asking if this is the problem, why do they keep on trying to build a nuclear program?
Yeah, well, good question, and there are a few different answers to that, including developments right up to the last minute here as we're talking, or the last day or two. So, first of all, under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, non-nuclear weapon states promise never to get nuclear weapons, but they also are guaranteed the right, the quote-unquote in the treaty, unalienable right to a civilian nuclear program. Now, you could look at that, as you might do, national security hawk as you are, Mark, as a pretty big loophole in that treaty that you could have completely mastered the nuclear fuel cycle and be able to enrich uranium hexafluoride gas to whatever percent you wish. And all of this is completely legal right up until the point where you decide to kick the inspectors out and flip a switch and start enriching to weapons grade and trying to make a nuke out of it, right? You could be a nuclear weapons threshold state. You could have a nuclear reactor where you produce plutonium that you could refine and have weapons grade plutonium as well. And so these are, from a cynical point of view, if you wish, right, massive loopholes in the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the overall civilian nuclear program regime around the planet, the Nuclear Suppliers Group and all these things. So if you're Israel or you're just an American hawk, let's pretend for the sake of argument that they're honest. They're just worried that they're going to use the civilian program as cover to build a de facto weapons program to get it to as late a stage as possible and then break out, as they call it, and make a nuke. But the thing about that is there's a lot of reason to believe that that's really not true, especially considering that the original conclusion by the CIA that, well, they were really looking into it before 2003, but then they stopped when America got rid of Saddam Hussein for them. I mean, at least that is consistent and makes sense that since George W. Bush was doing their bidding in part by getting rid of Saddam and that security threat to their border. But the thing is, as we know from Gareth Porter's book and his great work, the book is called Manufactured Crisis. And he shows that their conclusion that Iran was ever looking at nukes before 2003 was wrong. It's based on two things. One of them was a group of intercepts by the Defense Intelligence Agency for so-called dual-use items like magnets and whatever refined metals and whatever things that could potentially be used in a nuclear program, that they thought, aha, these are like illicit underground type purchases on the international black market, but we know about them, and so whatever. Well, those were all later resolved. And it turns out those were good faith estimates by DIA, but they were just wrong. And it turns out that the dual use, the civilian innocent use, was the IAEA showed that, in fact, here are those magnets and here are these different machines that are being used at the university for the stated civilian purpose and have not been diverted to military uses. So the DIA was not lying, but they were in good faith just wrong about that. And that was all later disproven by the IAEA inspections. And the other half of the CIA's conclusion that they were ever looking at making nukes was based on the Israeli-forged so-called smoking laptop or laptop of death that the Israelis made up and funneled through the Mujahideen-e-Khalq communist terrorist cult and had them turn it over to the IAEA, as Ali Heinonen from the IAEA admitted. That was where they got it from. And it was full of a bunch of nonsense, such as and this was even debunked by David Albright of the so-called Good ISIS and David Sanger in the New York Times, that they were developing a nuclear warhead to fit in a delivery vehicle that would not fit in the new design of Iranian missiles. And they had changed from, I guess, a bottle nose to a more cone-shaped thing. And so, or maybe it was the other way around, but whatever. It was the new missile wouldn't fit this warhead anyway, kind of thing. So it proved that the Israelis were making a good educated guess when they were forging the documents, but they didn't know that the Iranians were changing the nose cone of their missile. And if they had known, they would have updated their forgery, right? And then there were other things that totally disproved that laptop as fake. So, and then the CIA said in 2007 that they stopped even trying to look into how to make a nuke or even studying it or pursuing it in any way in 2003. And the CIA and all the rest of the American Intelligence Council have reaffirmed that conclusion over and over again, up to and including Tulsi Gabbard 1 year ago in the February threat assessment, which actually, I don't know if they released a threat assessment this month or not. They usually do in February, release like an unclassified national security assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency. I'll try to remember to look that up later. But 1 year ago affirmed that, and she in fact affirmed that again in Senate testimony just a couple of weeks before the war broke out last June. And so, and on top of that, the Ayatollah, the mean old Ayatollah from the revolution in the 80s, and the newer Ayatollah, who in fact has been in power since 1989, Al-Khamenei, they have repeatedly issued these fatwas, which say it is not just the law, but is supreme, written, high, holy law from God that weapons of mass destruction are haram. Now, I'm not a Shiite, and I don't trust in any theocrat who's a politician and a clergyman of some religion I don't believe in, so I got no reason to take that literally in any way personally as meaningful, other than the fact that clearly the government has obeyed this supreme leader. That has literally been their order, and they have not made chemical weapons. They have not made biological weapons. They have not made nuclear weapons. Even when Saddam was attacking them with chemical weapons with American help in the 1980s, they still didn't make chemical weapons in response. There's just no reason to believe that they've changed their mind about that. Now, don't get me wrong. According to the Ayatollah, God could change his mind about that tomorrow, but so far, there's no indication that they have. At least up until last June, when Israel and America started this war, And then the inspectors were kicked out. And so if anyone ever lost sight of the ability to measure and keep track of every last bit of nuclear material in that country, it would have been America and Israel who caused that break in the chain of evidence. On the other hand, it is true, as Donald Trump said, it was barely hyperbole, Mark. It really was barely hyperbole when Trump said that he obliterated their program. He completely kicked their nuclear program's ass. So they have these two massive facilities, especially at Natanz was the bigger one, and then Fordo as well. And they are closed for business, man. There's no uranium enrichment going on there whatsoever. They're demolished and their entrances have been sealed. And on top of that, their bluff has been called. Like Trump has already announced and proven, I will bomb you. So don't reopen them. Right? Like, what are they going to do about that? Nothing but get bombed, right? They can't do anything about that. And then the third facility is called Isfahan, and that was a crucial facility where this is where you take the uranium metal and you convert it to uranium hexafluoride gas, which that's what you use to enrich in your aluminum tube centrifuge cascades to enrich the uranium to higher percentages of U-235. Then you got to convert it back to metal again to use it for a fuel rod or a bomb or anything else. Well, without that conversion facility, you got nothing. Whatever uranium you have in whatever form, you can't change it. And that facility has been already completely obliterated as of last June and not rebuilt. And Trump said, and I don't know that this is true, but it sounded like he was telling the truth, man. I don't know. When he said this, I'm almost certain I saw like the audio or maybe it was a video of him talking to a reporter or something. Forgive me for my footnote, but anyone could probably look this up. It was just within the last couple of weeks. Trump said the Iranians started digging. They tried to start digging a new facility. And I forgot if he said, I called them or just I had somebody call, maybe a Rubio call or whatever, and let them know. Don't do that or we'll just bomb you. So just don't. So in other words, you know, quite truly, the old Mexican standoff where we said, if you make a nuke, we'll bomb you before you do. And they said, look, we won't make a nuke if you don't bomb us. So don't bomb us. That standoff was broken. And instead, Israel and America just started this aggressive war. At that point, hey, the fact is America is the superpower. And in fact, the thermonuclear weapon superpower. And Iran has no atom bombs and no ability truly, really to defend themselves. They do have a missile force that could potentially threaten American supplies in the Gulf, but they have a real deterrent there, which is that Donald Trump is loco. And so if America starts bombing the crap out of Iran and they hit back very hard, and let's say they overwhelm our defenses and they swamp our bases in Bahrain and Qatar and Kuwait and Iraq with missiles and kill thousands and thousands of guys, sink our ships in the Gulf or in the Indian Ocean. I mean, Mark, what do you think Donald Trump might do in a situation like that? I think he would get emotional. He would either, curl up in a ball and say, oops, I shouldn't have done that? Or he's going to probably get very, very, very upset and do something rash. And the Ayatollah is not a dummy, dude. So look at what happened last June. Trump called his bluff, and the Ayatollah just took it on the chin. Because what was he going to do? So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not predicting the best result here. But I guess my gut is not feeling like the worst case scenario. But then again, if the war is truly meant to completely destroy the regime and replace the regime, then, I mean, what would any regime do in that situation?
Right.
Probably shoot everything they got. Use them or lose them. If we're going to die, at least we're going to destroy Donald Trump's political career on the way out the door. Something like that.
I don't know whether that would do it. I mean, if American, they sunk a few American ships or something like that, I think Americans would react very poorly and probably want to go whole hog. They're not dead.
Oh, by the way, so I'm sorry, in direct answer to your question too, that I never did get to, but I need to get back to, which is that, so why insist on their right to enrich uranium? They have said it's just a matter of national sovereignty and independence. You can't tell me what to do. We signed a treaty. We promised not to get nuclear weapons, but they have a domestic supply of uranium. And they say, we want to burn that to run our electricity and sell our oil on the world market. And that's it. And you can't tell me that I can't do it. And imagine, quite honestly, America in a weaker position where, whatever's left of the United States and the world dictates to us, you're not allowed to have enriched uranium anymore. Oh, yeah? Like, nuh-uh. You know what I mean? The average man will grab his rifle to fight over that, even if we don't even know what that means. We just know that no blue helmet's going to tell us what to do. And so it's the same kind of thing here, where it's just a matter, and it's a matter of economics too. There's not that much demand in the world for uranium. There's a lot of demand for oil. And so it's just a matter of opportunity costs on the basic level as well. So that's why they keep insisting on it. But then that brings me to the latest thing, which is, according to, I guess, reliable sources, I don't know exactly what's going on, but they say that the latest offer from the Iranians, this is a huge climb down from Iran, Mark, is they're saying they will take a moratorium on any enrichment for 5 years, or maybe it was 3 to 5 years.
Can you hold just 1 second?
Yeah.
I got to take a break.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back. Free Talk Live.
Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click join at the top of the channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it'll cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. Higher donation tiers are available if you're feeling so inspired. You'll get a special membership badge that's visible in the Odyssey chat room, and if we get enough supporters, we may enable members-only chat. This new subscription method is a great way to decentralize our direct listener support away from just Patreon and also support a libertarian-run business, Odyssey. Please visit video.freetalklive.com and click join to subscribe to our Odyssey channel and help support spreading our message around the planet. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click join today.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. The International Energy Agency greenlit the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves in a bid to curb rising prices sparked by the war in Iran. FSN's Tony Waterman reports from Washington.
It's not clear what types of oil will be made available or how quickly it will hit the market. That will ultimately determine how impactful this release is. But it is the largest joint release in the IEA's history, accounting for roughly a third of the group's emergency stockpiles, an indication of how serious of a situation they believe this is, with concerns of a global recession rising. Oil prices have whipsawed since the start of the war, spiking as high as $119 a barrel. News of the release had little impact on crude prices, the decision already baked in.
Donald Trump said he was not happy with Iran's new pick for supreme leader. But in an interview with the New York Post, he refused to say what he would do about it. Mujtaba Khamenei was chosen by a group of clerics to replace his late father, who was killed on the first day of the war. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Bear in mind that Mojtaba Khamenei is someone that was sanctioned back in 2019 by the US Treasury Department due to his activities in the Iranian regime. The US has, throughout this whole process, made it clear that if the person that Iran chooses to run the country is not someone that's been specifically signed off on by the US president, that person would have a target on their back in the same way that the former Ayatollah had as well. The fact that we have now someone in charge of Iran that the United States feels it cannot work with, there seems, I think, little hope for diplomacy, and therefore the fear is that what we've seen in the last 10 days will only grow and potentially widen.
The Kremlin welcomed the U.S. decision to issue a temporary waiver allowing the sale of Russian oil at sea. FSN's Daria Bondarchuk reports from Moscow.
Moscow's Special Economic Envoy Kirill Dmitriev said that the U.S. exception for countries to buy sanctioned Russian oil stranded on tankers at sea is a de facto recognition that without Russian crude, the world market cannot remain stable. Under the 30-day waiver, these shipments can be delivered and sold until April 12. Earlier, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the exemption would only cover oil already in transit and would not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. The Kremlin, commenting on the U.S. Treasury decision, said Russia and the United States share the same interest in stabilizing energy markets.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, we're back with Scott Horton. It's Mark Edge with you. I want to tell you real quick about Salt Lending. It's saltlending.com. If you have cryptocurrency, you want to access the value of that cryptocurrency without selling it, you go to saltlending.com. They have cold storage vaults, and you can put your crypto in there and take a loan out against it. And you don't have to pay tax on it. That's a little tax loophole that the billionaires use. And you can use it too. Saltlending.com. I've worked with them for years and I recommend them heartily. Saltlending.com. Scott, I want to jump right back in. I've got so many questions with what we went over on the first segment there. Mm-hmm. The IAEA, what's that stand for?
That's the International Atomic Energy Agency. And I'm sorry, just to wrap up that last point real quick, was their offer was to go on a moratorium from any enrichment for 3 to 5 years, and then to enrich only up to 1.5%, which I don't even know if that's useful for their electricity program. But this is a huge climb down from their insistences, all through the past leading up to this. So it's a real test, honestly, of whether America's dealing honestly here or whether it's just quite literally they mean to use this as a pretext to launch a war of regime change.
So enrichment is necessary for nuclear power as well as nuclear weapons. Now, as I understand it, nuclear weapons only work with a certain level of enrichment. Nuclear power can be had with a lower level of enrichment. But enrichment itself is not an indication, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea. Enrichment is not an indication that Iran is necessarily is weeks away from creating a nuclear weapon, which they have been my whole life, right?
Exactly. And I mean, quite honestly, I remember, just because I have a very visual memory about these kinds of things. I remember driving my truck for work and sitting at the red light at 290 and I-35 and the top of the hour radio news telling me about Iran breaking out towards a nuclear weapon, and they'll have one by the end of the week or the end of the month or whatever it was. And this is in the year 2004. And because I know where I was and who I was working for and everything, you know what I mean? And if you drive for a living, if you're an air conditioner repairman out there working on a construction crew or any kind of contractor out there where you're out in your truck driving around and you're listening to talk radio, you probably have heard 50 million times about Iran's nuclear weapon. Just for generations in a row.
And it's never existed.
And what they won't tell you is that they've had this inspections regime guaranteeing that they are not using their nuclear material for a military purpose. So it'd sort of be like if you had a gun shop and people were always accusing you of selling illegal laser rifles to the Mexican cartels, and you said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let an ATF agent sit on a bar stool at my counter and watch me not sell laser rifles to Mexican cartels. I'm doing legitimate business here, everyone. And then they still came and said, see, he's a criminal. He's a bad guy. He's making and selling laser guns. But you got a cop sitting right there verifying daily that you're not breaking the law and that everything is above board here. That's the IAEA. They're the international ATF, basically, making sure, if that's a very poor analogy, but making sure that, you have nuclear material, you're introducing it into these machines. It's this much material, it spits out that much at this percent enrichment, etc. And so, go ahead.
Last night, Sean Hannity, I had the pleasure briefly passing through the living room as the senior mama was watching Fox News, her favorite news channel. And Sean Hannity said that Iran would not let American inspectors in to inspect their nuclear program or whatever's left of it, whatever's smoking rubble pile. Now, I think this is probably true in so much as why would they let American inspectors in? I mean, are there American inspectors?
There were, but after last June, they kicked them out and said that they were spies and that they were, helping with the targeting, which is highly probable. I don't know.
Why wouldn't it be?
And honestly, man, I got a lot of jobs and I did not keep up. And I admit I did not look into that any deeper, and I'm not taking their word for it, but I'm just saying, if they believe that, and it doesn't matter because America has allies all over the world, and their scientists are not compromised certainly not in any way that their national governments wouldn't know about or the CIA wouldn't know about. Under no circumstances are whichever scientists from whatever country allowed in there without American approval in the first place of who those people are and are going to be, speaking for the results of their inspections and whatnot. Anyway, the point is, man, that the real point is that this isn't about nuclear weapons. That even though America broke the stalemate and called their bluff, it looks to me, there's just no indication at all that they went ahead and broke out toward a nuke in some secret tunnel since then. You can just make up stories all day about, well, they might have, could have, but there's no indication that that's true. Instead, it looks like actually Trump called their bluff and kicked their ass. He blew their nuclear program up real good, and they actually don't have much of a leg to stand on as far as continuing it at this point. They're totally in a position of weakness here. And so there's no need to panic and think that there's any need to defend. And there's no need, Mark, in the world to think that anyone in our government thinks there is. They know there's not. Trump gets on there in the State of the Union. He goes, they just won't say those sweet little secret words. I don't know why they're secret. They won't say those sweet little words, those secret words. No nuclear weapon. But that's just total nonsense. They disavow nuclear weapons openly, publicly, 1,000,000 times over and over again. And no one who knows the first thing about that thinks otherwise. You could call them liars, but don't sit here and tell me they've never even said that they disavow nukes, because that's just not true. And it's on the level of, quite honestly, like they said about Iraq. Why won't he come clean about his weapons? Well, let's see. Saddam Hussein, he turned over a 12,000-page dossier on all of their WMD, which was totally legit. And they said, well, there's no new information here. Yeah, exactly, because all of it was destroyed. The very last bit of it was destroyed by the end of 1991, and the inspectors knew all about that by 1995. And if people say they heard the exception to that, the exception to that is munitions that were buried by the IAEA or the United Nations weapons inspectors out in the desert and were left there to decay on shelf life grounds, because it'd be safer to just do that than to try to move them.
Where would you put them?
None of that was a secret arsenal. All of that was capital D declared to the international inspectors, and they were the ones who chose to leave it there, including the same thing with a locker of yellow cake uranium in Iraq, which they just left there, and which totally proved what a lie it was that he went to Niger to try to get some secret yellow cake uranium when he had a giant store locker full of it. All he would have had to do is take some clippers and break the lock on there and go right in, if that had been his intent or even within his capability. Just like in 2002, Mark, we got to debunk the technical aspects of the aluminum tubes and what they're used for here, right? But also we got to debunk the idea that that's what this is about. This is about the Likud killing the Ayatollah so that they can break the chain of power that supports Hezbollah, their neighbor that hassles them on their northern border, so that they will have regional hegemony and be the unquestioned power with no one to balance against them, and have all their enemies pwned, as they put it, peace through strength instead of peace through being decent human beings and dealing with their neighbors in good faith.
So the press, I think as a generality, hates Trump. They really don't like this guy, and I see why they might look at him as a threat. Why doesn't the press make clear what appears to be just a run-up to war with no factual backing from what your claim is?
For the obvious reason that they're completely pwned by Israel, too. Look at the State of the Union. The only thing that the Democrats, or maybe there were a couple of things, but one of the only things the Democrats stood up and clapped for, and they despise Trump. A lot of them walked out in protest. They sit there with their arms folded, their bottom lips pouting, boo-hoo, dude, they hate him. But then he says, yeah, we're going to get that Ayatollah, no nuclear weapons for him. And all the Democrats stand up and applaud. And what's interesting about this, I really like it. In a George Carlinian, appreciate the excitement of the chaos kind of way. That right now you have 100, almost like completely on the left,
half, I don't mean leftists, but I mean the entire left half of the American political spectrum, the liberals, the progressives, and the leftists of all different descriptions. It's just completely the Democrat voters versus the owners of the Democratic Party on the issue of Israel-Palestine. And for that matter, you could extrapolate out really easily too. Another war for Israel against Iran. They were against it during W. Bush. I'm pretty sure they're all still good on it now. Or they default to good on it, right?
I remember an odd situation in, I think it was 2012. So I watched the national conventions, both the Republicans and the Democrats in 2012. I was really interested in it because of Ron Paul, as you can imagine, whose bust you have behind you. And I remember this weird vote at the Democratic National Convention. They took a vote that said that we support, I think it was Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And then they took a vote on it, and it was a voice vote. And it appeared to be very, very even on both sides. And then the lady that was up there, pardon me if I don't know her name, sorry, slipped down into the annals of history. Mm-hmm. She said, because it's a voice vote, and because I'm the speaker, I get to decide. So she decided that it was true that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. And I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. I tickety, they'll go and look this up. And apparently it's a big deal because, well, turns out Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel, and that it can't be the capital of Israel because of sort of political reasons. And to say so is kind of, I don't know, it's controversial in some way. And so half of their party's like yes, and half of their party's like no. And this is 2012. This is long before the whole Palestinian thing and all that. So I think you're absolutely right that there is a segment of the Democratic Party that's pro-Israel. That segment is in power and getting enriched in some manner or another. Yep. And then there's the largest segment, the voting segment, is anti-Israel.
Yep. And I remember that same anecdote, but I'll do you better. It was Mayor Villarosa, I believe was his name, if I remember right. It was a man, the mayor. And the vote was overwhelmingly boos and in the negative. And he was startled by that. And you could see him looking off stage for instructions. And then he says, the ayes have it. And the place was like in an uproar because it was an indoor stadium. It was like a basketball stadium or something. And the place was like, what? No, boo, more double extra boo after they had, that. It was bad. And, it should be people can look that up. I definitely remember that. And look, after the last 2 years of what happened right? in the Gaza Strip, for people, maybe I do know. It's a very, balkanized kind of media landscape out there. But for people who are not familiar, I know there are people who are not familiar. I would urge you to go to X. If you don't have a Twitter account, an X account, create one. And just go type in Gaza and look under media. If you're on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, there must be, I don't know how bad the censorship is. I know it's bad everywhere. But certainly, I'm usually on X, taking a small break to get some work done now. But you just look at Gaza on there, you will see that they deliberately kill civilians every single day over there. And this is during the ceasefire, man. And for the 2 years before the ceasefire that started in October, the so-called ceasefire that started in October, they were killing about a Waco massacre worth of people every day. It was somewhere between like 80 and 120. Waco was actually playing it down. It was somewhere between like 80 and 120 people. Someone had advised them somewhere in the, focus group results or something. This is what you can get away with. If it's 150 a day, that's too much. But don't bother skimping and only killing 25 because you can get away with at least about 125 or so, 100, 125. And they would kill 100, 125 people every single day for 2 years. After the first few months, it was more. For the first few months, it was more. But after the first few months, it was about, right around a Waco massacre every single day in the Gaza Strip. And you have to understand, man, if you don't, and your audience, that Gaza is an Indian reservation, right? It's not, Palestine isn't the country next door. It was already conquered. These people are living in a giant, essentially, concentration camp, right? It would be like if black crime got out of control so bad in South Chicago that they walled off South Chicago and then they just started bombing Chicago. Like, these people are, quote unquote, your people. This government it's not exactly their government. It's an occupation, foreign military government. But the people of Palestine Israel is on top of Palestine. And in Gaza and in the West Bank, even when they have the so-called Palestinian Authority on the West Bank, they're like trustees in an Israeli open-air prison. They work at the pleasure of the Israelis. They are an occupation force, a Palestinian, like, local native subcontractor under Israeli rule. And they deal with these people with ultimate violence. It'd be like if we had, whatever Indian reservations that where Indians still do exist in the United States, but if we just never left them alone. If the Anglos were still just bombing the Navajo, forever daring to act out or commit a crime or do a thing, we get to just bomb them and bomb them and bomb them and bomb them and kill a Waco massacre worth of Indians every day. You understand what I'm saying about the difference between Indians versus, like, if we were at war with Mexico? Not that it would be okay to kill civilians in a war with Mexico, but I'm just saying Mexico is a sovereign thing. The Indian reservation is under the control of Uncle Sam in the first place. So you don't get to just go in there and bomb it like that. Does that make sense?
It does to me. So it sounds like a genocide. And
it is.
I've often felt that this is the case. Now, I don't pay enough attention, but my sort of real concern is why do they stay? And isn't it cheaper and easier just to let the Palestinians go somewhere? Isn't there any country that'll take them? I mean, do we have to perpetuate a genocide? I mean, I understand why
that's the goal, right? Is to get the people of the world, and including the Palestinians, to just say, geez, you'd be better off to just admit defeat and go. But they just won't. They're not going to give up their land, and any more than we would. And on top of that, other countries don't want to do it because their name would be absolutely mud in their relations with all other Muslim countries forever if they were to take them. And no non-Muslim country is going to take them.
So the Muslim countries don't want the Gazans to escape.
Well, they don't want to abet the Israelis' mass murder and theft of their property by helping Israel to dispose of the people. That's what they don't want to do. And of course, by getting rid of all the Palestinians, then that means also giving up the last of Muslim control of any of those holy sites. And so that ultimately is the plan of the Israeli right, is to blow up the Al-Aqsa Mosque and to build the third temple and start sacrificing animals and force the Messiah to come and this kind of crazy stuff.
Well, why isn't this mosque blown up at this point? I mean,
well, you know what? Because the Israeli government so far has prevented it. In fact, at one point, some radical, sect, whatever they call them, some Orthodox sect, had planted bombs throughout the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And the Shin Bet National Police, basically their FBI, National Police, had caught them at the very last minute. Or I don't know how last minute, but the bombs have been set. So that's pretty last minute. The explosive had been set inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And, they've done this thing. South Park made a parody of it or whatever, but this is a real thing. There's a prophecy about either you got to wait around for the Messiah to come, but you can cheat in a way. And if you have a pure red heifer and you sacrifice this pure red heifer and use the right sacrament and the right ceremony with the ashes of this heifer, then you can take the shortcut and rebuild the third temple and go ahead and blow up the mosque and do it now. And so they've done this. They've had, evangelical Christian ranch. There's this one evangelical Christian rancher from West Texas, I believe, is the guy that got it done, who just poured a ton of money into genetic engineering. And they worked for generations on this. I mean, I remember Justin Raimondo wrote an article called Beware the Red Heifer back in 2002. And they finally achieved that in this decade, because it always had like one little white tuft of hair or something, and a rabbi would object. But they finally bred in Israel a pure red heifer, and then they sacrificed it and did the ceremony and the thing and whatever. So, I mean, honestly, man, this kind of thinking is driving American foreign policy right now. America's at the beck and call of serving not just the interests of a foreign state, but the interests of a foreign state that's on a mission from God to kill anyone who stands in their way of confiscating all of this prophecy and bringing on the end of the world. It's complete madness.
It does seem like complete madness, and you've given me some things that I didn't know previously as far as facts on this one, and I do appreciate that. Can we jump real quick to Venezuela?
Sure.
Tell me about Venezuela. It all just seemed like a surprise to a lot of people, although there'd been a huge military buildup and a lot of fishermen's boats got blown up. I mean, what happened with Venezuela?
Well, look, I mean, the thing with the boats, I guess, I always took that as mostly pretext, kind of warming us up for the attack, although they've done it since then, too. So I don't know if, like, they've just defined these orders down. None of these so-called fast boats from northern South America can get to the United States without stopping for gas 25 times or whatever. These drugs are not coming here.
Right.
You know, they're going to Trinidad and Tobago, and then from there they're changing to a transatlantic submarine and selling coke to Africa.
And it changes every 3 months. I mean, these places, there's all kinds of different places, and they're constantly moving around.
Of course. So there's a pretext for intervention mostly. If it's in any way a good faith effort to stop the spread of illegal drugs, then it's ridiculous and foolish.
As everyone has been.
Yeah, more likely it would be siding with one cartel over another. This group is favored by the CIA, and that group has fallen out of favor or whatever. That's really typically, I think, the way these things go there. Just like CIA. Everyone remember the gun walking scandal from the Obama years, where in Arizona, that gun shop was made by the government to sell guns to the Mexican cartels. Which Mexican cartels? The Sinaloa cartel. Why? Because they were fighting the Zetas. This is America's government in Mexico, right? It's just nuts. Anyway, as far as Venezuela itself, the fact of the matter is that Hugo Chavez was a commie thug and his economic policies are completely crazy. And Maduro is worse than him. And he did refuse to recognize the results of a fair election that he lost. And he's a commie scumbag, and his commie scumbag government was full of a bunch of gangsters and kooks, just like you would assume about them. If I told you, Mark, they're a bunch of commies, you'd be like, man, they must be a bunch of terrible people. Yeah, and bad at their job, of course, right? But on top of that was a massive economic war by the United States against them, where we essentially make it virtually impossible for foreign governments to come in and run their oil program for them. So only Chevron had it in there, and they were able to exclude a lot of competition. Exxon, everybody else was out. And but so their economy was, one, weakened by Marxism in all the ways you'd expect. But two, you can't underestimate the power of the U.S. Treasury Department as an international, Star Destroyer pulling into orbit over your planet to dictate to you how things are going to be or else. And they have the power of the 800 megaton gorilla at their disposal. This is why the creation of the BRICS movement and all of that is for people to try to escape the dominance of America's control of the global economic system through sanctions and all of these things. So anyways, they saw their opening, and who could deny? I'm sure they're making a Hollywood movie about it right now. Who could deny how amazing it is that the Delta Force was able to go in there and get the head of state and his wife in a way that is comparable to a night raid in Kandahar province in Afghanistan, where they're just going after some schmuck. Here, they were able, and I'm sure that there were bribes and high-tech means as well of suppressing whatever enemy fire. I think his people were basically presented with a fait accompli. You want to die too, or you want to sit tight and see the sunrise? And then they did it like that. And then, but here's the thing though, everyone in my mentions on Twitter was saying, shut up, stupid Horton. You don't understand. These commies were commies. And so we have to do this. And then I said, they are commies, but you don't have to do this.
Right.
And then that day, the next day, Donald Trump says, well, look, we're not putting the right wing in power there. They may have even won the election outright last time and had it stolen from them. But still, the entire regime is this commie regime. And we're not doing like Bush and Paul Wolfowitz in Iraq, where we debothify the whole government and kick every commie out of power there and dissolve the army and then do a big nation building project and take over Venezuela. That is suicide. There's no way we're doing that. So what do? We keep the commies. We kidnapped the top commie and we kept his vice president. And so now all of Venezuelans' communism belong to us and are the Americans' responsibility now.
Scott, what's the website so people can follow you and find out more of your content?
the best thing to do is just go to my Twitter feed, x.com/Scott Horton Show, and I got all my links there. The Academy, the Institute, antiwar.com, my show, and all my books.
Perfect. Scott Horton. That's Scott Horton Show on X. Free Talk Live.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Tired of the ever-inflating US dollar? You can live your life on Dash instead with some handy websites. BitRefill.com has been accepting Dash for years and has a ton of big-name retailers and brands including grocers, gas stations, phone refills, Amazon, and even prepaid MasterCards. Plus, many of their gift cards are available at a discount. But what about paying your bills? Spritz.finance can do that, and they can send dollars to your bank account in case you still need those for some reason. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless free market non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 2 up next after the news, here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. The International Energy Agency greenlit the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves in a bid to curb rising prices sparked by the war in Iran. FSN's Tony Waterman reports from Washington.
It's not clear what types of oil will be made available or how quickly it will hit the market. That will ultimately determine how impactful this release is. But it is the largest joint release in the IEA's history, accounting for roughly a third of the group's emergency stockpiles, an indication of how serious of a situation they believe this is, with concerns of a global recession rising. Oil prices have whipsawed since the start of the war, spiking as high as $119 a barrel. News of the release had little impact on crude prices, the decision already baked in.
Donald Trump said he was not happy with Iran's new pick for supreme leader. But in an interview with the New York Post, he refused to say what he would do about it. Mujtaba Khamenei was chosen by a group of clerics to replace his late father, who was killed on the first day of the war. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Bear in mind that Mujtaba Khamenei is someone that was sanctioned back in 2019 by the US Treasury Department due to his activities in the Iranian regime. The US has, throughout this whole process, made it clear that if the person that Iran chooses to run the country is not someone that's been specifically signed off on by the US president, that person would have a target on their back in the same way that the former Ayatollah had as well. The fact that we have now someone in charge of Iran that the United States feels it cannot work with, there seems, I think, little hope for diplomacy, and therefore the fear is that what we've seen in the last 10 days will only grow and potentially widen.
The Kremlin welcomed the U.S. decision to issue a temporary waiver allowing the sale of Russian oil at sea. FSN's Daria Bondarchuk reports from Moscow.
Moscow's Special Economic Envoy Kirill Dmitriev said that the U.S. exception for countries to buy sanctioned Russian oil stranded on tankers at sea is a de facto recognition that without Russian crude, the world market cannot remain stable. Under the 30-day waiver, these shipments can be delivered and sold until April 12. Earlier, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the exemption would only cover oil already in transit and would not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. The Kremlin, commenting on the U.S. Treasury decision, said Russia and the United States share the same interest in stabilizing energy markets.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. The Pentagon reportedly concluded that an attack on a girls' school in Iran that killed more than 165 people at the start of the conflict was the fault of the U.S. military. The New York Times reported that a preliminary investigation said outdated information may have resulted in the Tomahawk missile strike. FSN's Simon Marks reports from Washington.
U.S. officials familiar with the findings of the investigation say the strike on the elementary school was an American error. It was built on the grounds of a former base for the Revolutionary Guards in Manab in the south of the country and was incorrectly listed as a military target. President Trump has previously claimed the Iranians were responsible for the Tomahawk strike, but there's no evidence to support that claim, and the probe's outcome will boost calls for the U.S. to face war crimes charges over the killing of more than 100 children and teachers as the war began.
Some Asian airlines raised fears and added fuel surcharges as the Middle East conflict is driving up jet fuel costs and disrupting travel. The war has disrupted a key oil export corridor, driving up airline costs and pushing up ticket prices amid concerns about a broader impact on travel demand. FSN's Laura Westbrook reports from Hong Kong.
Thousands of flights have been cancelled since Israel and the United States attacked Iran at the end of last month. The war has caused restrictions on operations at key transfer hubs in the Middle East. There are fewer seats available after major Gulf carriers suspended flights, and that's contributing to ticket prices going up between Asia and Europe. Spiking fuel prices are also putting pressure on carriers. Australia's Qantas and Air New Zealand were among the carriers that announced price increases, while Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific says it's adding flights to London and Zurich as airspace closures and capacity constraints drive up airfares.
Those were some of the week's top stories. Ira Spitzer reports.
Following today's press conference in which NASA announced its continuing search for a planet capable of supporting NASA, researcher Dr. Kenneth Heiser sat down with Onion reporters to detail their ongoing mission to find a NASA habitable planet.
Our objective is to find a planet capable of nurturing not just life, but also a sustained interest in the exploration of the cosmos. Such a planet would need to have water and proximity to light and heat, but also life forms with even the vaguest understanding of the importance of astronomical exploration. Ultimately, this would need to be a planet with organisms that have a genuine interest in expanding the limits of their knowledge.
Heiser added that any planet capable of supporting NASA would need to be able to generate a steady stream of financing to meet the agency's $18 billion annual budget.
The important thing is we just need to be patient. There's a limitless number of planets in the universe, and eventually we'll find one with the resources to support our work. We just have to, right?
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. It's Mark Edge with you. And today I've got with me Jason Sorens from the Free State Project.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. Jason, I want to do a show in the Light of Liberty Forum, where I will be in the future and in the past by the time the show's heard. I want to do a show that is based around the Free State Project. Not because I think that it's the right answer for everybody. In fact, I think that it's a relatively narrow scope about who the Free State Project's right for. But I think it's right for those people. And I just want to focus on the Free State Project and see who it's right for. So tell me, what is the Free State Project?
The Free State Project is an effort to achieve liberty in our lifetime by encouraging liberty lovers from around the world to move to New Hampshire and by activating people who love liberty within New Hampshire. And we start out not knowing our state. So the first 5,000 people who signed up got to choose our state. We ended up choosing New Hampshire. I didn't live there. Most of the people who were in leadership in the project didn't live there. But since that time, thousands of people have moved to New Hampshire and gotten active and created a real community of people who love liberty and have had a big impact on freedom.
So almost every time I talk to somebody about the Free State Project, and it's their first time sort of understanding, they have an opinion on what state should have been chosen. And I harbor opinions from way back then. When did we vote?
2003.
2003 is when we voted. So way back then, I kind of had in my head where would be the best places. What do you think? Do you think that New Hampshire was the best choice?
I think it was, and I think we lucked out, actually, in our choice, because the reasons why New Hampshire is the best choice were not reasons we were considering at the time. At the time, we were thinking about the fact that the governor had invited us. It was the only state where the governor invited us. It was a place that already had a lot of freedom and still does. So no state income tax, no state sales tax, no mandatory seatbelt law for adults, things like that were on people's minds. But what was much more important than all of those things was the accessibility of the legislature and the political system in New Hampshire. So New Hampshire is a very decentralized state. It's the most decentralized state in the country. 2/3 of the tax burden is set at the town level, not even the county level, at the town level. And so it's very easy to change your tax burden by moving from one town to another, or by getting active in town government and voting directly on the town budget and setting your own tax rate. In addition to that, we have 400 state representatives. So that's a state representative for every 3,500 people. It is the largest per capita legislature in the English-speaking world. And that made it easy for people who were getting active to get elected and knock on doors and get to know their neighbors and then get into office. And that ability to scale up from a small group, a ragtag band of libertarians who thought they could change the world, to scale up to now a place where the House Majority Leader is a libertarian who moved to New Hampshire. So that ability to scale made all the difference to the success of the Free State Project.
When I moved to New Hampshire in 2006, and I believe I was mover 134, meaning 133 people moved before me, there was an organization called the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. It existed before the Free State Project. Now, in some ways, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance is conflated thoroughly with the Free State Project. They're different organizations, but they have a similar goal, right? So the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance rates the legislatures. Can you tell me about that?
So the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance was founded partly out of inspiration from the Free State Project. It was founded December 2003 by New Hampshire natives and people already in New Hampshire, looking forward to this influx of freedom lovers. And so what they do is it's a nonpartisan group. They look at bills that are proposed in the legislature, and they let people know about testimony in committees. They grade these bills essentially and put them on a gold standard that they distribute when they come to the floor for a vote. So they're advising legislators on how to vote. And then after the fact, they rate legislators based on how they vote on these priority bills and issues. And so the NHLA has been doing this work consistently every legislative session since the 2004 session. And as a result, they've had a big impact on roll call voting, on testimony on bills, on lawmaking in New Hampshire. And what's been so effective about them is that they are a volunteer base. It's a grassroots organization. They depend on their members to kind of get involved and kind of take up the cause when it comes to hearings or bills that are coming to the floor that are high priority. And so it's been a great way to mobilize liberty lovers to affect freedom in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I don't think that we can overstate how important the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance is to the success of the Free State Project. Now, when you look at how many reps are rated 80% or higher by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, you'll find that it's 160 reps. More than a third of reps I would call a libertarian. You can decide to call them what you want, but I'd say if you get 80% of your votes are liberty-oriented, rated liberty, then you're a libertarian. Fine by me. If you've got a higher rating or a lower rating, that's all fine. But essentially what that gives us is this incredibly powerful libertarian veto within the state of New Hampshire. None of your legislation, whatever it might be, is going to go through unless you can get the libertarians to agree or the Republicans to agree or the Democrats. You got to pick one of those three to agree. And that's very difficult to do.
Yes, there are very few bills that can get through without libertarian support. You have to have both Democrats and Republicans united against the libertarians,
which is rare.
Yeah, which is rare. And by Republicans, of course, I mean the non-libertarian Republicans who are probably not the most authentic Republicans, because as we know, the modern conservative movement that influenced Ronald Reagan really came out of early libertarianism, and that's why Reagan himself said that libertarianism was the heart and soul of conservatism. So, sometimes we get accused by the more establishment GOP in the state of not being real Republicans, when in fact, in many ways, we are the authentic Republican tradition. And they're compromisers, and that's fine. We can still make deals with them, but yeah, we're now a big chunk of the Republican Party, and I would say about 25 to 35% of the state house, depending on how you measure it, is generally libertarian. About 8 to 15% of the state Senate, depending on how you measure it, is libertarian. And obviously, you can't find those sorts of numbers anywhere else.
Right. It's really incredible. And I love the terminology, the libertarian homeland. I think it's just so apt because, we're not claiming that we're free in New Hampshire. We're just claiming we're more free than where you are. If you're listening to me in English, the chances are very, very good that we are freer than wherever you are. And thus, perhaps, if you want to run for office, if you want, to live your life without government intrusion inside the United States, you don't mind the cold, New Hampshire makes sense for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And freedom is going vertical in New Hampshire right now, especially since 2016. And this is one of my favorite findings is when I look at the Freedom Index that I'm a co-author on it. I have other co-authors, and we have found in the past that, 1 year we found Florida was number one in freedom.
Yep.
But over the last 10 years, New Hampshire has just rocketed past everybody else, including Florida. So it's exciting to see that.
What about COVID? I mean, New Hampshire wasn't the freest place in America during COVID. It seemed to be, because of its decentralized nature, it seemed like some areas of the state were freer than others. And of course, there was a great deal of groundswell against the governor, and he got all, butthurt about that. What about COVID? How's that figure into your rating?
Yeah, so Ben Powell at Texas Tech has a ranking of states on their kind of lockdown freedom index in 2020 and 2021. New Hampshire is number 7 on freedom from lockdowns. So, here in New Hampshire, there was a lot of protesting against the stuff the government did do. But when you compare it to most other states, New Hampshire was actually relatively free during COVID. It wasn't as free as South Dakota, but it was still up there. And given the kind of political leanings of the entire region, I think that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. And we certainly didn't have any kinds of lockdown policies at all from 2021 on. So whatever policies we did have were kind of limited to the first few months.
When it comes to freedom, I think that New Hampshire is really hard to beat. But on any given issue, it can be, say in the top 10 or whatever. But what it comes down to is that it's in aggregate freer than any place. Sorry, Texans. Freer than any place. And by the way, the only people who are more insufferable about their patriotism are free staters. The only people more insufferable than Texans are free staters.
That's right. Yeah, talk to free staters and they're New Hampshire this, New Hampshire that. No place could ever be as good. And I'm inclined to agree with him. I mean, it is a special place. It's the only place in the country where you have a state that's been red at the state level and has growing levels of freedom, but also very high income, very highly educated. It has that positive orientation toward the market economy. It doesn't get dragged down in some of the culture war stuff that you see in some of the deep red states. So it's really got that almost perfect balance of kind of social tolerance and support for free markets. And it has the history and the motto, right? Live free or die. It was a state where the group that formed the Republican Party came from. They were New Hampshire abolitionists who were leaving the Democratic Party and the Whigs to form a new anti-slavery party. So there's this history of support for liberty. I was working on this today. I was writing about it, looking at the 1924 Socialist Progressive presidential campaign of Robert La Follette, and the state where La Follette's support was least outside the South was New Hampshire. So you see this throughout.
It's not what you expect from New England, right?
No, it's not. So you see this throughout history. There's been a lack of support for socialism and other forms of collectivism in New Hampshire.
That's one of the real critiques about New Hampshire is from mostly Democrats on a state level. They're like, you're coming here and you're changing the state. And I don't think that's so. I think we're coming here and preventing them from changing the state. In fact, if we are changing the state, we're changing it back to what it was more so. It may not be that New Hampshire intended to be freer than the other states. It may not be that they even thought about things like that. I think more than anything, it's just because of the way that the government is constructed in New Hampshire with 400 legislators that get paid $200 every 2 years to, sit in office. These are activists. They have to be activists in order to do what they do. And that in and of itself keeps the lawyer industrial complex at bay to some extent. And so we've seen a slower growth of government than most other places. And look, if you're a Democrat and you want more government intrusion, you want more robust funding of government schools and whatever it might be that you think that the government is super good at, even if you're a Republican who wants this, freedom, your utopia is less than 35 miles away. There isn't a point in the state of New Hampshire that is more than 35 miles from some other state, Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont. And Massachusetts and Vermont, by the way, pretty darn blue. Maine, I don't know. That's a strange place.
Yeah. And New Hampshire provides a competitive constraint to those states. I mean, until very recently, Massachusetts was a low tax state. They recently enacted a millionaire's tax. But before that, they had a 5% flat income tax. And no one thinks that Massachusetts voters, the majority of them, really wanted that. I mean, it's such a deep blue state. They elect people at the federal level who are always for hiking taxes.
Yeah.
So why do they keep taxes low? Because otherwise, business and taxpayers would flee to New Hampshire. So we're happy to play that role.
Yeah, right. So where are the millionaires going to go? Welcome to New Hampshire. It's the White Mountain State. You're going to love it here. And again, I'm not going to say that New Hampshire's a perfect place by any stretch of the imagination. But it is pretty awesome if you are a libertarian. And there's more work to be done. And you're welcome. I think that if you consider yourself a libertarian or you're interested in real small government, you ought to come to New Hampshire and check it out. Just see what we've got going on and make a judgment for yourself. Now, the Liberty Forum goes on here in the recent near future, but will be the past by the time the show airs. And that's a pretty cool event. Also, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which has been at times the largest libertarian event in the world. So those are good ways to check it out.
That's right. So those are our two annual events. PorcFest, is short for Porcupine Freedom Festival, PORCFEST.com. You can check that out. We are going to be running PorcFest this year at the end of June, as is traditional, but it will take a very different format this year. So stay tuned to learn more about that. And it will probably change again next year. Liberty Forum is our winter event. That's more of a traditional conference where we get together and talk about policy issues and philosophy and economics and things like that. It's going to be really exciting this year. It's always in the kind of February, March, or early April time period. So you can check that out at nhlibertyforum.com. We definitely will be running that again in 2027. So those are great opportunities. You can also go to fsp.org and just reach out to us, learn about events that might be happening at a time period when you're free to visit us, and we'll hook you up.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think Liberty Forum's a good idea. Just get an idea what the cold's like. I mean, it's not so bad. We have heaters in New Hampshire. What kind of person do you think should be interested in the Free State Project? If they're out there listening to you, who is it you're talking to about moving? Because there's plenty of people I do not want to move. Look, if you want to see bigger government, stay in Massachusetts.
Absolutely. So we're looking for people who think that there should be very limited government. They favor free markets, social toleration, and they want to make a difference. So it's great if you come here and you just enjoy what we have to offer. That's fine. We want you to, but we especially want people who want to get involved and make a difference, because you can be a force multiplier. You'll be working shoulder to shoulder with other people who share your passion for a society of free and responsible individuals. And that's going to make your efforts so much more effective than they would be wherever you are now.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people who've heard about New Hampshire, and for whatever reason, there's somebody in the state that they don't like. And I could list off a long list of names of people who, oh my goodness, you have this person in the state or that person in the state, and they believe this or that, and that's contrary to what I believe, and they're not a real libertarian. And I get the point that they're saying. I get it. There's distasteful things that are said by people who call themselves libertarians. But the Free State Project, by its very nature, the fact is we can't exclude people. And if they want to call themselves libertarians, I'm not here to pull anybody's membership card or anything like that. What do you have to say to somebody who's like, I'm so flustered by this person?
Yeah. So I would say we have thousands of people who've moved to the state.
Do you know how many, by the way? I mean, thousands is true.
Yeah, it's somewhere over 7,000.
Yeah. And now, is that 7,000 in state or 7,000 who have moved? Because obviously some people have come and gone and died and any variety of things. I'm just curious. I know we had a goal of 20,000 at one point, and once you get stuck on the numbers, it's hard not to get stuck on the numbers.
Yeah, at this point, I'm pretty sure it's over 7,000 in state who have moved. But yeah, I don't have access to the database myself, so I can't.
And my
count
guess
them.
is that there's probably, for every one person who's moved to New Hampshire and stuck around, there's another person who has been activated in New Hampshire who was, here or moved back or something.
Yeah, no, I know people who are serving an elective office who moved here without ever signing up for anything, but because of our work. So who knows exactly how many are here.
Some people don't even know to sign up at freestateproject.org. And I'm not suggesting that you have to sign up at freestateproject.org. But don't worry, that won't stop them, them and those. It won't stop those who oppose you from calling you a free stater. And at this point, I kind of think it's okay. Like, I guess we're just free staters now.
Yeah. And to return to your original question, obviously there are going to be lots of different types of people here. There are going to be some factions. I would encourage you, those of you who move, and those of you who are considering moving, not to spend too much time online, because the types of people who are drawn to social media fights are not the types of people who are actually making a big difference. So I would say that the FSP, we're an educational charity. We're educating the world about the benefits of living free in New Hampshire, but we can't take responsibility for everything every individual does. And so we're letting the marketplace of ideas sort that out. If there are people out there who are not real libertarians, or maybe in some ways they're even bad people, maybe they've done some things, then it's important for the social network to kind of out those people and for people to kind of take care of the kind of the marketplace of ideas is what I would say.
Yeah, I'd say don't worry, because we are taking care of that within the sphere.
Right. That's right.
Ultimately, and if their ideas are good enough, and enough people share their ideas, whatever they might be, then they're in competition. I don't know what the best ideas are. I just know what ideas I like. And I do think that libertarianism, I think it is the best idea, but there might be, some way of thinking that's different from mine that's better. I don't know. That's what competition is, and that's what we ultimately are advocates for here.
And I apply that to the FSP itself. You know, if you're upset by some decision that the evil board has made, then my advice is simply, do your thing. Show us how to do it better, and we all learn from that. And I would say that there have been many cases over the years where people did something tactically that other people disagreed with, and they thought this was going to hurt the cause, and maybe they were right. But people learned from that, and they changed tactics. So I think the overall story is that we're winning, and so you should come be a part of that.
Everybody's got a purpose in life, and some people's purpose is to serve as a bad example. So check out more at freestateproject.org. Jason Sorens, thank you for sitting in with me. Tell me about AIER.
You got it, AIER.
AIER. Tell me about them real quick.
Yeah, American Institute for Economic Research. If you haven't heard of us, we were the think tank behind the Great Barrington Declaration during COVID, and a lot of people have heard about that, opposing lockdowns. I work there. That's my day job. I'm an economist. We do a lot of work on economics opposing the trends on both the left and the right these days in favor of, more economic isolation and nationalism and collectivism and statism. and so we're facing this nationally, and we're facing this in the States. And so our work is focused on that. We're a very principled organization, and you can find our work at outlets like the Daily Economy. That's our daily publication. We have multiple things we publish every single day at thedailyeconomy.org. So it's a very informative source for understanding what's going on in the economy right now and what's going on with public policy.
Following reports that local full-blown alcoholic Ken Matheson has such great friends that let him drink himself to death right before their eyes, the 32-year-old man spoke to reporters during a typical evening of binging with his closest friends.
Man, these guys are like brothers to me. I don't know what I'd do without them.
The chemically dependent man, who can reportedly always count on his friends to look the other way, facilitate belligerent behavior, and encourage his self-destructive impulses, informed reporters that the members of his tight-knit circle are, quote, the best buddies a guy could ask for.
Can you just shut the fuck up? Seriously. Just shut the fuck up. I lost them. Back down. Keep going. What the fuck are you looking at? I love you, man. I love you.
Check this week's Onion Review for further developments.
I love you. Oh, God, I love everybody.
This is the Onion News Network.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. The International Energy Agency greenlit the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves in a bid to curb rising prices sparked by the war in Iran. FSN's Tony Waterman reports from Washington.
It's not clear what types of oil will be made available or how quickly it will hit the market. That will ultimately determine how impactful this release is. But it is the largest joint release in the IEA's history, accounting for roughly a third of the group's emergency stockpiles, an indication of how serious of a situation they believe this is, with concerns of a global recession rising. Oil prices have whipsawed since the start of the war, spiking as high as $119 a barrel. News of the release had little impact on crude prices, the decision already baked in.
Donald Trump said he was not happy with Iran's new pick for supreme leader. But in an interview with the New York Post, he refused to say what he would do about it. Mujtaba Khamenei was chosen by a group of clerics to replace his late father, who was killed on the first day of the war. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Bear in mind that Mojtaba Khamenei is someone that was sanctioned back in 2019 by the US Treasury Department due to his activities in the Iranian regime. The US has, throughout this whole process, made it clear that if the person that Iran chooses to run the country is not someone that's been specifically signed off on by the US president, that person would have a target on their back in the same way that the former Ayatollah had as well. The fact that we have now someone in charge of Iran that the United States feels it cannot work with there seems, I think, little hope for diplomacy, and therefore the fear is that what we've seen in the last 10 days will only grow and potentially widen.
The Kremlin welcomed the U.S. decision to issue a temporary waiver allowing the sale of Russian oil at sea. FSN's Daria Bondarchuk reports from Moscow.
Moscow's Special Economic Envoy Kirill Dmitriev said that the U.S. exception for countries to buy sanctioned Russian oil stranded on tankers at sea is a de facto recognition that without Russian crude, the world market cannot remain stable. Under the 30-day waiver, these shipments can be delivered and sold until April 12. Earlier, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the exemption would only cover oil already in transit and would not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. The Kremlin, commenting on the U.S. Treasury decision, said Russia and the United States share the same interest in stabilizing energy markets.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, it's Mark Edge. Thanks for joining me today. I've got with me Sean Owen of Salt Lending. Sean, you and I have been doing business together for years at this point. The really cool thing about Salt is that it is a lending platform that you can use cryptocurrency. In my case, it was Bitcoin. And I could access the value within my Bitcoin without selling it, which is super important to me. And Salt Lending's been doing this longer than any other institution in the world. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah. So when I talk to people about it, the first thing they ask me is, how do they store the Bitcoin? And I think that there's a variety of different ways. Obviously, I'm not there day to day within Salt Lending. So can you describe that?
Yeah. So on the topic of custody, of course, you've got, the technical version, which should really be a matter of, I split it into custody and control. So who owns ownership and control? Custody is a combination of those two. And of course, you're always the owner of the Bitcoin, and the control is in your control inside of Salt. But we technically are a custodian, and we work with a partnership of different portfolio custodians. If you have a preference, we don't really pick a winner. We have our own custom technology, for Bitcoin Core, and then we also use qualified custodians and partners that are pretty well known, reputable.
So why would people want to get a loan against their Bitcoin? Like, what are the main reasons people are doing it?
I think the most important, use case is simply that you, with all property, that you have something that you want to collateralize. Easiest to think of like real estate, or Bitcoin, I think, is very easy too. You're simply putting a contract on top of that to say, hey, I agree to encumber this or keep this locked up as proof that I can repay you. And I am willing to work with you on terms as a lender if I see that, because now I've got assurances that I can lend you money and you're not going to disappear. And in fact, Bitcoin makes, I'd say, the perfect collateral in many regards, if not all regards. And yet there are some trade-offs, and it is different. So there's some learning curves. But if you really think about it, it's the same idea of just, why would somebody want to borrow against their real estate? Why would you want to finance, say, the purchase of a car or any other collateral asset that you could think of? We don't get into, say, the alternative side of that, which would be, in contrast, say, a credit score, which is your earnings potential or your ability to prove credit worthiness off of what your track record has been, where I would say that's a poor form of collateral. That's not necessarily a great form of repayment, although people do it all day long. If you go to the opposite side of the spectrum, Bitcoin is kind of the apex, perfect version of that.
Right. But Bitcoin moves up and down, right? So, well, I mean, we've seen that recently, right? Bitcoin's been as high as $125,000 per Bitcoin. We've got to come up with different things. We probably should talk about how much a Satoshi is worth, but right. I can't do that math in my head off the top of my But, Bitcoin's at $120,000 per Bitcoin. Now it's at 75 or 80. I'm not sure exactly. So you've seen a dramatic drop recently. What happens when somebody takes out a loan when their Bitcoin's worth $125,000 and then it drops to $70,000, say they collateralized at 50%, what occurs? How does it work?
So the preface to this, I'm going to back up just a little bit, would be, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. It will always be one Bitcoin. As long as there's 21 million, there's still just 21 million, whatever the actual number might be at any point in time. It's a fixed supply. And then if you contrast that against some other currency, I would say in our case here, we're talking about a dollar or a stable coin or something that is on the other side of it. That becomes relevant when you have that in a loan contract. But if you're looking at just Bitcoin purely, the price is dependent on only if you need to sell or care. And I think people get very caught up in that and maybe shouldn't, right? It's important to put it in perspective that if your home was always liquidatable and on a market where you could sell it instantly, people would be freaking out all the time because the price would suddenly matter. But it really only matters if you need to sell and or want to or care to just look at like, what if I did theoretically? And that's, I think, even an abstract. And so now enter in, I've collateralized this. I'm going to use it as proof to repay on a loan. I've borrowed some amount of money. And the lender, of course, wants to make sure that they're covered in the event that it goes to, let's say, the proverbial zero, which is less of a concern these days. But I think it's still the question that somebody in the fiat world thinks about and asks.
Yeah.
Then you have to have some assurance that you could dispose of or take possession and sell. Not that you should or will, but that you could. And depending on those preferences, we then get into, as much customized optionality for the borrower itself as possible, because not everybody wants to sell immediately and not everybody, but some people do. Some people just say, I just want to be covered. And some lenders just want to be covered. And so in that situation, in simple terms, you have Bitcoin worth some amount of dollars. At the beginning, let's say it's 50% loan to value. So you have twice the amount of value in dollar terms of Bitcoin as you do for what you borrowed. Lender's very happy. And now the price has crashed halfway. We've gone taken a haircut all the way down. You've got some options. You can either add more collateral. You could send in money to pay down the loan, to recalibrate is what I would call it. But you're just adjusting to make sure the lender knows you're good for it, that there's some buffer above and beyond what you've borrowed. You can let it liquidate. If you said, hey, I was good, I borrowed at a price that's very good for me and I don't need the money back, I've already put the money somewhere else, then you've effectively still had the same value you would have, if not stopped a loss potentially in a large amount. That's what you'd call stop loss if you were talking in terms of trading. In a loan, it's somewhat similar. Both parties are still happy. Yet not everybody wants that. And so in the middle, we have a scenario where people just need more time. We call that kind of the pause button or stabilization, where you can kind of break and just say, all right, I'm at a funeral. I understand the market has changed from the original terms, but I'm good for it. Just trust me, I'll get back to you. And that factor actually matters. So that's a lot more like a normal loan. You wouldn't just liquidate somebody's property out in the middle of Arkansas or Kansas. You couldn't even really, right? You would just say, hey, we have a collateral call. We need a maintenance. We need to make sure this is adjusted. What's your plan? And then on the far other side of it, we have, just don't even call me. I'll put up enough collateral and personal guarantee, and my net worth's great. I can't be bothered with that. Or let's say a lot of people in the space now, that's a large learning curve to learn about the whole idea that we just discussed. Although it's fairly simple, it's still new to somebody in a market like this. And so
this is what I love.
Just turn it off altogether.
This is what I love about Salt, is that it is both a modern crypto business where everything is sort of interfaced with online. You've got a great app and these sorts of things. You can manage pretty much everything about your loan in it, but it has that kind of small town bank feel where you can have a relationship with, if not the manager, a loan officer, right? Where if things are like, look, I just need 5 days or something. And then it's like, okay, 5 days, gotcha. And that's really been my experience. This is absolutely accurate. Now, I haven't had that particular problem because I am a miserly man. I hate the higher interest rate. So the loan to value is sort of attached to the interest rate. You're going to pay a higher interest rate if it's a lower loan to value. I don't know. You describe it because you'll know the words better than I do.
Yeah, no, so there's 2 points that I'd like to talk about. One, we're in this age, I would say today, we're in 2026, March at the recording of this, and we've seen agentic and automated AI, and the world would be trending towards this automated idea of the business being just computers. And in fact, when we started the business, that was really the core thesis, was we could create these contracts that were self-executing using smart contracts and programmable money features. and you wouldn't even need any humans involved at all, right? And it was like that for quite some time. However, you learn pretty quickly, and we've learned over the last decade, that there are so many edge cases and circumstances, and sometimes somebody just needs more education and or somebody to hold their, some neck to choke. So then you get, people, and then you build relationships, and then you realize, this is all built for people anyway. The whole purpose is that the technology should improve our quality of life, that we're creating a better financial service and a better financial system in our efforts here. And so there tends to be this leaning towards, we've had such a great response with that we don't want to lose that kind of small town feel, as you would. More so, it's how do you use the technology to scale the parts that it's great at, and how do we leave the room for the humans to be humans where they're great at it? And that usually comes in the form of questions or just needing some answers or assurances, or I have a random scenario, right? And then you reach out and we talk and we figure it out and we solve it. And I think we're better for that. And so that's that topic where we really are kind of this hybrid, interesting position where we're a bridge between a world that's legacy and it's been around forever, which I would call the US dollar fiat system, and everything that's built up around it. And then this new emerging financial infrastructure that's still being built out called Bitcoin. And then, the long tail of blockchain, cryptocurrency, everything else. So that's where that kind of intersection really becomes valuable, I think, and important. And we get a lot of feedback often that that's one of the things that people eventually turn around and say that's why they stuck around for such a long time. On the other point, yes, there are terms where the impact is cheaper if you have more collateral or have a preference on saying, I'm good for it. I just want the best rate. I'm looking for a forever loan. How do I get there? Right. And so there's this intersection, although sometimes I think it can be a little confusing on all the mechanics. There's effectively some, XY diagram between time and money that you're always looking to say, how many different versions of this equation can we customize for people to get the best circumstance for their time and their money? And then that creates these different loan terms. And some of those come with different parameters. Somebody might really care a lot about, I just want the cheapest rate of interest. Somebody else might say, that's not the concern to me. I just want to know that if there's a margin call, I'm covered, right? And so we get this kind of sliding scale both directions in those parameters.
I think that, and a lot of people out there, they just need the money for whatever they need the money for. I know a friend who's used Salt to buy a house. I have several friends at Salt. I know a friend who uses Salt to finance his business when he needs, just sort of in and out of liquidity, pays it back and uses it. As I understand it, there's some mining companies that use Salt that they access the value of the Bitcoin they've mined without having to flood the market at certain times with Bitcoin and, these kind of things. It's sort of fascinating, all the different reasons that people use it. We'd talked at one point, I was looking at buying a car and, it was just like, yeah, sure, we'll give you a loan against your Bitcoin for the car. Not a problem. For me, it's easier than going this place or that to get the loan. It's just sort of one-stop shop. All my, loan issues are handled right in the Salt app. And I think it's pretty nice. And my experience has been good generally all along. And speaking of all along, I think this is sort of a funny situation because cryptocurrency is new. But Salt is this institution that's been within cryptocurrency for as long as I can sort of remember. When was Salt created? When would you say your first moment was?
I'm actually grinning because, going even further back, it was listening to Free Talk Live that is where I attribute me hearing about Bitcoin for the first time. And so this has been such an interesting journey with you, particularly, Mark, because, you and a few other people, that I can still remember listening to your voice way back in the day before we ever met in person, right? In the very early days when you didn't really know who to trust and who to talk to, and everybody was kind of spread out all over the place and using pseudonyms and whatnot. And so that transpired from early days of, I would say, this is a really cool idea, but, full disclosure, it was possibly never going to work. I was in it just because the idea, it wasn't about making money or anything else. It was completely about the principles and how great it would be if we could develop technology that would create these attributes of, what Bitcoin brings to the table. Fast forward from then to, getting to where there's a community forming. I hosted the first meetups in an area that I kind of switched over from just putting all my time into, let's call it a hybrid of liberty-orientated politics versus figuring out what's going on with the economy after 2008. Getting involved with gold and silver, really, which is kind of a long route to, whole learning curve that then leads to me listening to Free Talk Live and learning about Bitcoin early on. And then, you get to the point where there's something real here. And I knew I just was obsessed with it and wanted to build something. Started looking around to meet other people, found some other interested people that were very much interested in seeing if there was something to be built, entrepreneurial. And eventually the idea kind of lands to 2015, I think.
2015.
Exactly. Yeah. And the funny part is you mentioned this, you've used Salt to go buy a car. Well, that was one of the things that kind of pushed me over the tipping point of I will go all in on this idea that time is right, even though we're way early. It felt like it was time. I was talking to my bankers about getting a car loan and, debating and arguing and trying to make the case very nicely about why they should be, caring about the Bitcoin on my balance sheet, right? And they were just like, no. Nope. It's kind of infamous. I've said it a lot of times, but one of the guys took me out to lunch, which I thought was interesting. Hey, would you mind going out to coffee or something? And he sat me down. He's like, look, we really think you're a good guy. And just want you to kind of understand, like, can't do anything with the Bitcoin. And normally we just shut everybody's accounts down, right? If you mention Bitcoin or find out about it. Yeah. If you even say the word and they're like, we're not going to do that to you, but there's nothing we could do with you right now. Right. And I was like, okay, well, I appreciate the heads up.
And then he asked you how to buy Bitcoin.
Yes, totally. That actually happened for sure. And we became friends. It was great. Yeah. And so that led into kind of how cool would it be if we could just borrow against our Bitcoin and find other people that would realize that we're holding forever, right? Like, we believe there's value, so you should trust us. And we're willing to take the most important thing, which is custody, and lock this thing up so we can't run away with it, just to prove this is the best collateral. And that was the beginning and kind of has been ever since. Like, how do you evolve and bridge this technology into the existing infrastructure? Which, it's first they laugh at you, first they ignore you, then they fight, and then you win. It's that whole journey all the way through and through, more than I would have ever kind of imagined, for sure.
Do you think we've won? Do you think Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, because at this point there's like ETFs, there's not just Bitcoin, there's Ethereum. But at the same time, I see this price volatility. I've said myself, if Bitcoin's worth $1, it's worth $1 million. But now we see Bitcoin kind of topping out at 125. I don't know. In some ways, I kind of think it's like gold, is that once the big guys got in, us little guys, like they try to squeeze us, like they control the market in a way. What do you think?
So one, I think there's two questions there. They're both really interesting. So the first one would be, have we won? It's really hard to know between when it switches from they're fighting you to they join you, right? Like, that's a hard one because you still have to assume they're joining, just to like find another way to fight. So who knows? I don't know. It does feel like it's beyond the point of any in my mind, yes, we've won. Like, it was won a long time ago. The technology is self-evident. If you understand it well enough, this must be true. And you can logically work through why this is a better system all the way through and through. And then you just have to realize it takes a long time to harden and educate and onboard billions of people into something new.
I think you might know that we've won when JP Morgan buys Coinbase, right? Like,
right. Which seems kind of obvious, right? That they'd at least try. Or Coinbase buys JP Morgan.
It could happen. And I'm for sure. That world.
Yes.
Or the merger
that definitely could happen. And so that gets into like the price discovery, right? Which is so important. It's always kind of the most significant onboarding factor, even though I wish it wasn't. It's true. Most people get onboarded because they see the price and the number go up. It's the best marketing ever, right? But who would have thought that we'd even be where we're at now with so many public companies going public and companies like Coinbase that theoretically could buy banks without a doubt. If once we get there, give it another few legs up. And I think those are inevitable too. Now to the point of market manipulation, which is what I would call it, with paper trading and all kinds of shenanigans that happen in the markets forever. I'd say the markets have always been just, as rigged as they can be, right? As much as people can get away with, there's somebody there.
Every market.
Every market.
Orange juice to gold.
All of them, right? Because they're all somewhat engineered and, fraudulently controlled and manipulated from the government down, right? And so, like, have we ever seen a free market? I don't think in my life. Definitely not 100%. So would we like to? Yes. But have we? I don't think so. So, like, the question then becomes, can Bitcoin be a honey badger one more time in that regard, in that arena, and kind of throw off any kind of enemies there, right? And just say, I don't care. That would be specific to the point of once you have people issuing Bitcoin derivatives, And there will be many more because that's what finance does. It just finds as many different interesting ways to kind of abstract on top of. And in some regard, even a loan is in a way kind of like that. It's a contract. I wouldn't call it quite a derivative, but it's starting to bridge into where you get into these derivatives. The question then becomes, do we have enough insight into those markets? And is it big enough to where we can see if there's manipulation this time around? Right now, I don't think so. I think it is being manipulated a lot. And anytime there's this Jane Street or anybody else for that matter that can find a way, they will, right? If they can take advantage of it. Do I think that it's possible that Bitcoin does outgrow that and change that market? Yes. I just don't know what time horizon it takes to kind of evolve to the point where there's just clearly a bigger, better global system that doesn't allow that the same way. Once you get to completely on-chain, that dramatically reduces, right? And you can see that in all the test cases that we've seen with the side chains and whatnot.
Yeah, and I can't predict the future either. We sit in 2026, but I also sat in 2011, right? And so I've been here, the first mention of Bitcoin ever in any media was on Free Talk Live in 2010. And watching that evolution over time, what I can say is that every single time I've seen somebody bet against the coin, they have lost. Totally. There's a few people who manage to sort of sell here and then buy again there. And I've seen a very few people manage to do that twice, right? Yeah. And every time you think that you're the one who can figure that out, it just does the opposite thing. And this is what I say to people is that you want Bitcoin to go up? Well, have me sell, and then it'll definitely go up at that time. You pay me enough money to sell my Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin's going to go up because every time I sell a Bitcoin, the market goes up. It seems like every single time. You get 80 short years on this planet, and you've got to buy some things, sell some things, pay for some kids' school, and do all the stuff you got to do.
Yeah, I would never bet against Bitcoin long term. More likely, in my mind, I would bet that Bitcoin does win the shorts, right? Whoever's short against it, they're sooner or later going to learn. It's a bad idea. And whoever it is, that one guy or two guys that you time the market every time for 10 years, kudos to you, right? Like, I get it. Somebody can do it, just not most people.
Yeah, if somebody says that they've timed the market 3 times, I presume they're lying. The greatest...
I know one guy, I won't mention his names, but there's one guy that maybe has made it that long, right? And I'm just like, I don't know how you're tempting fate so many times.
Yeah, it's really something. And one wonders, obviously you're going to win some, you're going to lose some on these bets. And I guess you only have to win, 60% of the time or whatever. But those aren't the games that I want to play. Well, again, like I said, the market just responds to my buys and sells in the opposite direction, it seems.
That's back to your question, right? So, like, why sell? What do people use it for? It's mostly in part, hey, I need some cash, but I don't want to sell this asset. And I know enough to know that I would rather hold on to this asset over here than the cash over there. And so they make that trade-off because they need time or they need cash. That is like the primary use case, right? Versus, say, the worlds that we were just talking about, they can get you into all those predicaments. Usually with Bitcoin, it's just best to find a way, however you can, to leave it sit, which is hard, right? It's hard, but it's the best.
Well, it makes it easy when you have an insult, though.
It does make it a lot easier. I know we've got a lot more to build. I'm always looking at like how much we need to do to get the entire financial system built, right? Like in my view, it's just a matter of how many years does it take us to build everything in this new reality that's better, and how long does it take for the technology and all the environmental variables to get there. So it feels like we still have a ton to do, but if you go back in time, we're so much further along now than we were then, right? We really have kind of created many different tools that are valuable across the whole space, and not just SALT, just in the ecosystem. That's encouraging, and I do think that we are creating better outcomes over and over. It's when you start thinking about Bitcoin, there's a curve there, but it's a good, healthy one.
I have gone all in on SALT. I really think it's a great company. I am now a shareholder of SALT and proud to be so. And I'm bringing it to my listeners. Now, I don't bring a lot of companies to my listeners. I'm as careful as I can be. Also, I've decided that the best way, I think, for people to start this process is for me to do a little hand-holding. As I said, I'm a shareholder. Email me at salt@markedge.org. Email me at salt@markedge.org, and I'll start you in the process. If you want to access the value in your Bitcoin, in your cryptocurrency, you can email me first, and we'll get you started. Right, Sean?
Yeah, and I would say to anybody listening, just mention Mark for sure. We'd love to meet you, we'd love to help wherever you're at in the curve, you're brand new or been around forever.
Yep. I think that it's a good move. So absolutely, if you do decide to get a hold of Salt directly, mention my name and email me, salt@markedge.org, and we'll get you started. Taking out a loan is a tax-free thing to do. So fundamentally, the percentage that I pay you, Salt, it's a small amount compared to what I would pay by selling my Bitcoin.
Right. That's actually one of the larger use cases, I would say, is people are timing an event. They say, I know I'm going to need to sell some assets at some point, but I don't want to sell my Bitcoin, and it's tax season. I'll borrow a little bit of cash just to pay off some taxes, and I'll write it off instead of taking a capital gain or loss on their positions, depending on where their tax jurisdiction is. That's definitely a big one, and we don't give tax advice, but we definitely will help people as far as what loan's going to fit you best. But yeah, that's a good point.
Thanks, Sean.
You bet.
Hi, I'm Montel Williams. Most of you know me as a talk show host, but I'm also an author, actor, single father of 4, a fitness writer, avid snowboarder, and I'm also a medical marijuana patient. Like many of the million people who are living with multiple sclerosis, I'm in pain every single day. And sometimes my nerves are so raw that if you brushed up against me in an elevator, I'd scream. I can't sleep at night from the pain, and sometimes the spasms in my legs are so intense they will wake me up throughout the night. I've tried the strongest prescription medications available, and I'm going to tell you, they do not work. In fact, they leave me in a stupor, and most of the time, it's impossible to even live your life. Now, I've tried medical marijuana, and I'm going to tell you something, it works. If you'd like more information about medical marijuana, you can contact the Marijuana Policy Project at mpp.org or call 1-877-JOIN-MPP.
So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 3 up next after the news here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. The International Energy Agency greenlit the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves in a bid to curb rising prices sparked by the war in Iran. FSN's Tony Waterman reports from Washington.
It's not clear what types of oil will be made available or how quickly it will hit the market. That will ultimately determine how impactful this release is. But it is the largest joint release in the IEA's history, accounting for roughly a third of the group's emergency stockpiles, an indication of how serious of a situation they believe this is, with concerns of a global recession rising. Oil prices have whipsawed since the start of the war, spiking as high as $119 a barrel. News of the release had little impact on crude prices, the decision already baked in.
Donald Trump said he was not happy with Iran's new pick for supreme leader. But in an interview with the New York Post, he refused to say what he would do about it. Mujtaba Khamenei was chosen by a group of clerics to replace his late father, who was killed on the first day of the war. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Bear in mind that Mojtaba Khamenei is someone that was sanctioned back in 2019 by the US Treasury Department due to his activities in the Iranian regime. The US has, throughout this whole process, made it clear that if the person that Iran chooses to run the country is not someone that's been specifically signed off on by the US president, that person would have a target on their back in the same way that the former Ayatollah had as well. The fact that we have now someone in charge of Iran that the United States feels it cannot work with, there seems, I think, little hope for diplomacy, and therefore the fear is that what we've seen in the last 10 days will only grow and potentially widen.
The Kremlin welcomed the U.S. decision to issue a temporary waiver allowing the sale of Russian oil at sea. FSN's Daria Bondarchuk reports from Moscow.
Moscow's Special Economic Envoy Kirill Dmitriev said that the U.S. exception for countries to buy sanctioned Russian oil stranded on tankers at sea is a de facto recognition that without Russian crude, the world market cannot remain stable. Under the 30-day waiver, these shipments can be delivered and sold until April 12. Earlier, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the exemption would only cover oil already in transit and would not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. The Kremlin, commenting on the U.S. Treasury decision, said Russia and the United States share the same interest in stabilizing energy markets.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. The Pentagon reportedly concluded that an attack on a girls' school in Iran that killed more than 165 people at the start of the conflict was the fault of the U.S. military. The New York Times reported that a preliminary investigation said outdated information may have resulted in the Tomahawk missile strike. FSN's Simon Marks reports from Washington.
U.S. officials familiar with the findings of the investigation say the strike on the elementary school was an American error. It was built on the grounds of a former base for the Revolutionary Guards in Manab in the south of the country and was incorrectly listed as a military target. President Trump has previously claimed the Iranians were responsible for the Tomahawk strike, but there's no evidence to support that claim, and the probe's outcome will boost calls for the U.S. to face war crimes charges over the killing of more than 100 children and teachers as the war began.
Some Asian airlines raised fears and added fuel surcharges as the Middle East conflict is driving up jet fuel costs and disrupting travel. The war has disrupted a key oil export corridor, driving up airline costs and pushing up ticket prices amid concerns about a broader impact on travel demand. FSN's Laura Westbrook reports from Hong Kong.
Thousands of flights have been cancelled since Israel and the United States attacked Iran at the end of last month. The war has caused restrictions on operations at key transfer hubs in the Middle East. There are fewer seats available after major Gulf carriers suspended flights, and that's contributing to ticket prices going up between Asia and Europe. Spiking fuel prices are also putting pressure on carriers. Australia's Qantas and Air New Zealand were among the carriers that announced price increases, while Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific says it's adding flights to London and Zurich as airspace closures and capacity constraints drive up airfares.
Those were some of the week's top stories. Ira Spitzer reports.
Saying that he has no idea what to make of the mixed signals, area man Pete Summers told reporters today he keeps getting ambiguous text messages from local woman Haley Mueller, claiming that she's not at all interested in him.
One minute she's like, I don't want to go out with you. And then she'll mention how she has to go hang out with her boyfriend. I mean, what am I supposed to do with that?
Summers, who first met Mueller at a friend's party last month, informed reporters that the 27-year-old's increasingly perplexing text messages have left him unable to ascertain whether or not she would want to date him. He also noted that Mueller's behavior at social gatherings was equally vague.
Last weekend, we were at a party, and every time I would go up to her, she just said, "Leave me alone." Then I text her the next day, and she totally doesn't even respond. I mean, she just needs to make up her mind and tell me what she wants. She hasn't answered my last 3 phone calls, so maybe I should go over there and make sure everything's okay.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, it is Mark Edge with you. And before we go on, I want to tell you about Psy. It's psy.xyz. Psy is a new project that I'm working with. It's a cryptocurrency project. It's private, and it's a smart contract platform, and it's scalable. It's already done more than 500,000 transactions in a second in beta. So it is ready to rock and will be released later on this year, in the first half of this year. So it's psy.xyz. Check it out. I have with me today one of the new stars of the Libersphere, right? What do they call them? Celebritarians. I have Sally Mayweather. Sal? Yeah. So, like, is Sal your, like, real name, or... No, okay, not even that.
It's a pseudonym.
Okay. Everything's made up. I don't want to know your real name. Please don't tell me.
I don't blame you for not wanting to know either.
So I had the pleasure recently of being on your X show. This is an Extreme. Is it supposed to be Extreme? I don't know what it's called.
You know, I like that. I've never actually put that together, but it is an extreme stream. And I like that. Yeah. It was great having you on, honestly. Everybody said that it was one of the best shows we've ever done. I think it's already up to like 30,000 views. You know, we're only on Twitter because I've been banned from every other platform. So I don't think that's too shabby for one social media platform. But that was in no small part due to you. So hopefully we can keep it going.
Well, 20 years worth of broadcasting doesn't hurt when doing a show. But I really want to talk about me and how frigging awesome I am. What I want to talk about is I would say that you and your brand on X, these are sort of an unlikely thing to happen. So tell me the first little bit before the first big retweet. What were your thoughts? What'd you do?
So initially I was a neoconservative, warmongering lunatic back in the Bush days, and I was going to school for political science, and I had these dreams. I was going to, it sounds crazy now to say it, but I was going to go on K Street and become a lobbyist and make all kinds of money, and that was my goal. You know, I was not your normal Republican, obviously. And I can remember sitting on my couch watching the Republican debates, 2008, thinking to myself, man, the only person on this stage who's making any bit of sense is the guy who I'm supposed to think is crazy.
Yeah.
Let me look more into this Ron Paul guy. Let me see what he's all about. And I really liked his economic platform. So I found Walter Block and Peter Schiff, who were his economic advisors. And I started watching Walter Block lectures on YouTube and those old school Peter Schiff was right videos. I don't know if you guys remember those. But if you have, you go on YouTube and check it out. You know, he was predicting the whole subprime financial crisis right before it happened. And I thought, man, here's Walter Block laying out the academic end of things, and here's Peter Schiff laying out the market end of things, and it all marries and makes sense. And that was kind of it. Before long, I started going to PorcFest. I was listening to Free Talk Live and working my little job, in college, of course. Finally, when I graduated, I thought to myself, man, I got all these degrees in political science, and I don't believe in politics anymore. Now what? And I was reading books about entrepreneurship and e-commerce. So I started this whole Twitter thing, and I basically got a following because I was posting memes nonstop just as an outlet to vent my frustration with the political...
So like political memes, you know, the sort of righty memes kind of things?
No, they were libertarian memes.
Okay.
But, anti-government, I would just say. And you'd be surprised how popular the anti-government message is. I mean, you wouldn't, of course, but most people would. And that's how I built a following.
Even the Republicans like it until they're in power.
And vice versa. When the Democrats like it, when the Republicans are in power. It's really kind of weird. But then I started getting some pretty big retweets, and the account blew up. And
So that was that. Now tell me, who was your first big retweet? What happened there?
Honestly, I don't remember. You know, I used to get a lot of like big Bitcoin maxi accounts, like way back in the day. before the whole block size wars and stuff like that.
Well, then they're not Maxis.
Yeah, right. Well, before, it's like Dan Held and all those guys would retweet me, and Roger Ver, he would retweet me often.
I remember Roger Ver saying, Sally Mayweather is my new Twitter account back then.
Yeah.
That's what made me follow you.
Yeah, so he's actually put a lot of people onto my account. So it's taken off. But, lately I've been sort of shadow banned because I've been speaking out against the war machine.
Let's talk about shadow banning here in just one second. First off, if people don't know who Roger Ver is, describe Roger Ver to me.
Roger Ver, they call him Bitcoin Jesus. He's one of the kindest people that I know, and he's also one of the most influential people behind the scenes in the liberty movement. Every time I talk to somebody who's got a new project or something, Roger Ver is always backing them, and he's behind them 100%, supporting them in a variety of ways. And we got linked up because he was like, "Hey, man, I love your Twitter account." And I was like, "Yeah, I've been following you, your Bitcoin stuff for years." And what happened was I had him on during the block size wars, and I wasn't even picking a side. I just wanted to hear him out. And I had this enormous backlash, like unlike anything I've seen on Twitter before, just for having him on the show, Mark. Yeah. I didn't even necessarily agree or disagree. I was just picking his brain. How could you have this man on the show? He's a heretic, And then just based off of that backlash, I thought, again, I better look into this guy because he's pissing off all the right people.
You're only taking flack when you're over the target, right?
Bingo. And the more I delved into the block size issue and stuff like that, I realized he was 100% right. That's when I became a huge supporter for Bitcoin Cash and big blocks in general. And of course, that did me no favors in terms of following with the maxis. Yeah,
I think that it's time to heal the rift in Bitcoin, in my opinion. Everybody got their say, and the things went the way they went. And I don't have to like it. I just gotta sort of live with it. As far as Roger goes, I would mention he heard about Bitcoin on Free Talk Live, which if he's Bitcoin Jesus, then I'm Bitcoin John the Baptist. But he's a very humble man. He doesn't like the name Bitcoin Jesus particularly. And in fact, I think Bitcoin Johnny Appleseed was a better term for him back then. And now he's more like the privacy guy. He just likes things like that. He's a great guy.
Yeah, no, you can't say enough good things about the man. And I also kind of have taken that privacy turn along with him just because of the war on crypto and seeing how they've gone after Ian and Alexei Pertsev and Roman Storm and developers, and they've really sort of criminalized fungibility and privacy. You can see I've got the Zano hat on, I've got the Firo sign, the Zano sign, and Freedom Dollar, and Edge Wallet, so I'm all about it now. I got the Zano shirt on.
Yeah, I think that privacy is way more than the war on crypto. It's the war on people, because if you don't have privacy, you don't have really much of anything. The government is getting intrusive in every way in your life. Back in the 1990s, maybe they knew about your car, your house, and your bank account, but they didn't know what every transaction you made. Now, with the way the monetary system's set up, they know everything you're doing all the time. And they're collecting it up on databases. They're using AI to kind of put it all together. And, well, we don't know what it's going to be like. You should be scared, ultimately, because this is something that is not good that's going on. So I think that every man, woman, and child in America ought to be trying to figure out how they can use private crypto for transactions and day-to-day life as much as they can, just to keep things as private as they can, because the less the government can see into your life, the better off you are. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, the FBI sent out a memo last year in 2025 asking good Americans to use cryptography to keep themselves obscured from the Chinese. So even if you think that everything's fine with the American government and that no Chinaman could ever get into the American government and find out all the stuff that they have, and no Russian would ever hack in and get that information, and that the United States government, when it gets digital information, it's like a big vault and it never loses that information, even if you think that absolute insane piece of fiction, Then the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the world's super patriots, right? They told you to get a damn encrypted messaging service and stop sending texts. You are the weak link. Loose lips sink ships. Our bases in Dubai, I should say "are" as though I'm some great American, right? Are being bombed by the Iranians, and it's because you use text, Mr. and Mrs. America. Get with the program and do what you're told. Right? I mean, I love it when the good guys, the bad guys, and all the guys are telling you to use privacy, use encryption.
Well, it's interesting because the greatest threat to our privacy is from the government. And for the government to say China's the issue, when let's not forget when Eric Swalwell was found in bed with the Chinese spy. So it's like, who's really revealing information to the Chinese here?
Right.
Congress, right? So, and of course, by I tell people KYC is the illicit activity because that's what exposes our information. When they collect that information, where else would you divulge all such personal details if not through government forced or coerced KYC?
Yeah, it's true. KYC really puts you in a pickle, and the government and their contractors, they lose this stuff all the time. It's like a sieve, So, in my opinion, it's the only sane thing to do. Patriotic, anti-patriot, don't care, Kardashian, the Yankees, I don't care what it is you think, you need to be using encrypted communications and encrypted transactions as best you can.
So as I was saying, I was in the Bitcoin Cash community, and then I sort of pivoted to the privacy community. And I'm actually going to be speaking at the Bitcoin Cash conference in May about the need for privacy on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain.
Huh. I kind of thought of Bitcoin Cash as like, over. That's not how you see it, huh?
No, not necessarily, because now you can trade it privately on the Zeno blockchain.
Okay.
It kind of Zeno.
But you can trade anything privately on the Zeno blockchain, right?
Yeah, literally, which is why I'm such a huge proponent of it, including, they have the Freedom Dollar here, which is the first decentralized stablecoin built on a private blockchain. I mean, that's huge. It's completely unfreezable, unlike Tether and USDC. So Zeno's killing it, and they're really very innovative. It sounds crazy because I started off in sound money. Like, that's what kind of sparked my interest in Ron Paul. You think I would have read that part that, Rothbard said about fungibility, but I just kind of skipped over it, not necessary. We'll take all the other bits and pieces of it. Had I listened, I would have been much more early to the privacy game.
Yeah, everybody can kick themselves about why they didn't get into crypto sooner, but ultimately, we all got here when we got here, and we're still early, and it's still a good thing. And I'm not in crypto for the sort of the investment aspect, number go up. My life is good. I make enough money. I'm good. So you've gotten into crypto and all these things. Didn't you get some retweets by Elon Musk?
Yes, I got a bunch of retweets by Elon Musk, especially during the early days of Javier Milei, because I was, excited that we had this libertarian fight, like a real Rothbardian. I think he named one of his dogs is named Rothbard, and right. I was really excited. So I went on a meme-making spree about Javier Milei. Elon Musk liked a lot of those retweets. He posted a lot of them, retweeted a lot of them, quote tweeted me a few times.
What's better, a quote tweet or a retweet?
I think a retweet is probably better. At the same time, I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah. If I could get anything tweeted by Musk, I'd take it.
Right, exactly. He's the worst is when he actually steals the meme. When you make the meme, and he steals it, and then he posts it. Like, there's this one. It's pretty funny of like this guy, and he's laying in bed, and he's got his girlfriends on top of him. We'll just leave it there. And he's also on the computer, so he's paying attention to the computer, and it's like Javier Milei wins resounding victory or whatever it is, and you could see my little tag in like the reflection of the window, but he posted it as if it was his own, and I'm like, you just started this monetization program, man, like,
yeah, and then you're stealing memes. Well, it's funny being somebody like Musk, you don't get to do what everybody else does, which is steal memes. I mean, memes are just stolen on the internet, but because you own the multi-billion-dollar meme generation thing, you got to retweet, man. And I think he's probably learned that over time. But, I mean, I can forgive to some extent so long as he's learned his lesson.
Yeah, well, I think he no longer really retweets me that often because, again, like I'm always posting about the war machine and Israel, and he does not. I don't think he shares that opinion, or if he does, he's
wise enough not to share it.
right, exactly, yeah.
So let's talk about that. So, what is demonetization? What is shadow banning? What is that?
So it's really interesting because when they started the monetization program, I mean, they were cutting me huge checks, and slowly that went down and down and down, and then they changed how content creators get paid. So that has all fallen naturally, which I'm okay with. I wasn't getting paid to start with, so I'm not really, in the meme game for the
It does feel bad though. I mean, one day you're making $10,000 a month for a year, and then the next year you're making $7,500. The year after that you're making $5,000. It's like, this is not going the way that I need this to go if you want me to keep doing this.
Thank God that, I have other streams of income. I've got the live stream that we have sponsors for, and I have my e-commerce stores, Agora Threads, and 3D Printer Go Burst, so I'm not beholden to that money. But, so in other words, basically it works like this. I've been deboosted by 65 to 78%. Shadow
78, you said?
Yeah.
Let's just call that 80.
Yeah. So my normal reach is, down by that amount.
And you know this to be true, or this is, just the cycle of how popular you are?
No, so there's actually a prompt that you can enter into Grok, and it'll tell you if you're shadow banned, if so, how much, and for what reasons. And I entered this prompt, and it said, like I said, 65 to 80% deboosted, and all of the reasons that they listed was, using the word Israel, and daily posting about Israel, and anti-Zionist content. All of this makes me suspect that Twitter has taken a payout from the Israeli government. But either way, I'm not going to stop, speaking out against the wars. And no matter if they can take all my money, I'm still going to be anti-war. So
I too am anti-war. I really get. It's difficult, right? Like, I've got Jewish friends that make the point that if we stop, just tell the Palestinians, hey, we're done messing with you. And they are not. They're definitely not done messing with the Palestinians. Right. But if we did that, then they would just be awful. And that's the difficulty is that there's a whole bunch of history going back there, and it doesn't seem like anybody wants to give an inch.
Yeah, see, my opinion is that the Palestinians shouldn't give an inch because they're the ones who are under occupation. So I don't really believe that an occupied people can be the aggressor. When they act out, it necessarily by definition is self-defense. And
well, what if they created a two-state solution? I mean, they've tried, or even a three-state solution for that matter. They tried that, and they're shooting missiles over the wall.
Yeah, right. Well, again, any two-state solution wouldn't necessarily take a piece of what was Palestine and be called Israel.
So you mean you're not talking about the piece that's called Gaza. You're talking about the whole thing, right?
The whole thing. That is Palestine up until World War I, when the British came in and they promised the same spit of land to the Arabs and the Zionists in exchange for their support during World War I. And, most of world history can be traced back to the British, unfortunately.
There is a lot of that.
Most of the problems we have today start with...
those British. Well, the point I would make there is that at some point, you look at my gold tooth here in my mouth, right? Maybe a molecule of that belonged in King Solomon's mines, right? And could some Jewish person come along and claim my tooth because it's in part theirs? They have some claim on it, and I think it's at some point you have to give it up, right? Like the American Indians know they're not getting back all of America,
right?
And I would say that in two particular instances, the Cubans that fled in the '60s are not getting back Cuba, and the Palestinians, who probably never owned land there in the first place, they were just renters on the land, are probably not getting back Israel. I mean, I've been to Israel. It's a modern country, and it isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. They're not winning the fight by any means necessary, just as the Cuban rebels who just landed yesterday, they weren't successful either. And, unless the U.S. government puts their finger on the scale to tip it, unfortunately, I don't see a clear path to victory for the Palestinians or the Cubans or the Native Americans. Realistically, it's not going to happen,
Sal, I do appreciate you coming on the show. Tell people how they can find you best. What's the best way to follow you?
I'm on all your different social media platforms, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. You can just look me up, Sal Mayweather. I'm sure it'll come up. Beware of the imposters. I will never DM you about crypto. And also check out our weekly live stream on X every Wednesday evening, 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Eastern.
And I will be on those as often as I can coming into the near future.
Lovely. I can't wait.
It's Mark Edge. I want to talk about salt lending. If you have cryptocurrency, you want to access the value of that cryptocurrency without selling it. You go to Salt Lending, they have cold storage vaults, and you can put your crypto in there and take a loan out against it, and you don't have to pay tax on it. That's a little tax loophole that the billionaires use, and you can use it too. I've worked with them for years, and I recommend them heartily. Email me at salt@markedge.org. Email me at salt@markedge.org, and I'll start you in the process. If you want to access the value in your Bitcoin, in your cryptocurrency, you can email me first, and we'll get you started.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market. Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer with a look back at some of the week's top stories. The International Energy Agency greenlit the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves in a bid to curb rising prices sparked by the war in Iran. FSN's Tony Waterman reports from Washington.
It's not clear what types of oil will be made available or how quickly it will hit the market. That will ultimately determine how impactful this release is. But it is the largest joint release in the IEA's history, accounting for roughly a third of the group's emergency stockpiles, an indication of how serious of a situation they believe this is, with concerns of a global recession rising. Oil prices have whipsawed since the start of the war, spiking as high as $119 a barrel. News of the release had little impact on crude prices, the decision already baked in.
Donald Trump said he was not happy with Iran's new pick for supreme leader, but in an interview with the New York Post, he refused to say what he would do about it. Mojtaba Khamenei was chosen by a group of clerics to replace his late father, who was killed on the first day of the war. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Bear in mind that Mojtaba Khamenei is someone that was sanctioned back in 2019 by the US Treasury Department due to his activities in the Iranian regime. The US has, throughout this whole process, made it clear that if the person that Iran chooses to run the country is not someone that's been specifically signed off on by the US president, that person would have a target on their back in the same way that the former Ayatollah had as well. The fact that we have now someone in charge of Iran that the United States feels it cannot work with, there seems, I think, little hope for diplomacy, and therefore the fear is that what we've seen in the last 10 days will only grow and potentially widen.
The Kremlin welcomed the U.S. decision to issue a temporary waiver allowing the sale of Russian oil at sea. FSN's Daria Bondarchuk reports from Moscow.
Moscow's Special Economic Envoy Kirill Dmitriev said that the U.S. exception for countries to buy sanctioned Russian oil stranded on tankers at sea is a de facto recognition that without Russian crude, the world market cannot remain stable. Under the 30-day waiver, these shipments can be delivered and sold until April 12. Earlier, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the exemption would only cover oil already in transit and would not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. The Kremlin, commenting on the U.S. Treasury decision, said Russia and the United States share the same interest in stabilizing energy markets.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. It's Mark Edge with you, and I've got with us today, I have Carter from Psy.
Hello to all the Mark Edge Show fans. I'm a big fan myself and really excited to be here.
Carter, we met at Bitcoin 2025. It's almost a year ago now. And I was just walking along looking at all the booths. This show had 30,000 people at it. It was huge. I saw Brian Johnson from Don't Die. It was quite an event. But I was walking by and I saw your booth. Now, as you can imagine, I'm skeptical of everything I see in cryptocurrency at this point. And you guys have this, this big booth. You're giving out a little swag. You got the pretty ladies. I've seen this shtick before, but it turns out your coin is, your imaginary coin at this point is very unique. So tell me about Psy. Tell everybody about Psy.
So Psy is a new decentralized proof of work blockchain that's fully privacy preserving and is horizontally scalable, which means that you can build sort of all of the Web3 stuff, daily drivers of the internet, whether it's payments or social networks or anything of value that's, fully embraces the values of blockchain. So you can build really any decentralized application at scale. And ultimately, Psy is built so that we can make a new internet that's truly decentralized and censorship proof and fulfill the values and aspirations of blockchain.
Yeah, so the few sentences you had there contain a lot. But let's start with the biggest promises. We're going to build a new decentralized private internet. I mean, I've heard this before. I've heard it from MaidSafe, and I've heard a few things like that, but I don't think it was quite ready to happen. But technology improves. Moore's Law says every 18 months or whatever. What made this possible? Walk me through it.
So first of all, speed was definitely a component. So as you said, with Moore's Law, the computers are getting faster. It unlocks things that maybe were theoretically possible before and makes them practical. And one of those things was zero knowledge proofs, right? Which is something that we use. But the main thing is that we had to build a new architecture for blockchains. And specifically, The way that other blockchains works is by having everyone on the network execute every transaction, right? So like, how do we know that Bitcoin is secure? Well, every single Bitcoin node is running every transaction. So if someone like publishes a false transaction or an invalid transaction and you're running a Bitcoin node, your Bitcoin node will pick up that it's false or invalid, and then you'll know that that transaction should be blocked, right? So the way that Bitcoin is secured is that, frankly, every single Bitcoin full node processes every transactions from Genesis, right? And then we also have proof of work, which means that we can tell, like, that's sort of the other component where we can tell, okay, maybe there's all of these valid transactions, which ones actually happened in the blockchain. But the problem with that, of course, is that if everyone needs to be able to run every transaction for the network to be secured, it also means that everyone needs to be able to see every transaction. And it also means that you have to have a machine that's fast enough to run every transaction, which means you either have to have a small number of transactions so that all of the nodes can, check every transaction and make sure that everyone's able to keep up, right? And then at the same time, we also have to publish all the transaction information. So anytime you send a transfer on Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana, it needs to be publicly available. Anyone should be able to, read the full transaction, because otherwise, if you don't see like what the transaction information is, how would you be able to check to see, like, let's say you're sending me $100. How would the blockchain be able to check if you have $100 to spend, right? You have to be able to see who's sending it and what the amount is, right? So there was certainly that speed component, which unlocks zero knowledge proofs. We've made them practical, but also we needed to switch to a model where rather than having the whole network validate every transaction, instead, what we do is you prove on your own machine that your transaction is valid, and then you send that proof to the network, and then everyone's going to check the proof, right? So rather than, making the transaction information available to everyone, we make it so that you can prove that it's valid without disclosing that information. So everyone still knows that all your transactions are valid. You're not spending more money than you have, but at the same time, all of your actual balance information, sender information, it's all encrypted. And then on top of that, we had to add something like smart contracts. So probably a lot of folks that are fans of the podcast are aware of Monero, Zcash, these wonderful technologies, which do have privacy, but they don't have smart contracts, right? You can't build an application on it. You can't bridge over tokens. You can't do US dollar, payments, as much as I'm a fan of, Psi and Bitcoin for not having horrible inflation that, debases the monetary supply every year. Many merchants have yet to subscribe to our belief system, right? So it's very inconvenient to not be able to pay for things in dollars or in euros or whatever. And with Psi, you can do all of that. And then again, at the same time, I say we want to build this new decentralized internet, which also means that we're going to have to find a way to scale, right? We know existing blockchains, the more sort of transactions you have, the slower the network is, or the beefier the node you need. And that's meant that most sort of crypto ideas of making new decentralized applications that normal folks actually use, that kind of hasn't really taken off because we can't really build anything that has been able to reach that many people or to support that many people using it once. And with Psi, we use this technique called recursive zero-knowledge proofs, where I have all these proofs of these transactions, and then I'm going to split them into batches and then make a proof that those proofs are valid and so on and so forth until we have one little proof that you can verify in half a second on an Apple Watch that proves all of the transactions in the whole blockchain. And I know that may sound magical, but I hope I answered your question in as understandable a manner as I can. I'm a technical person, so I apologize to the listeners for boring anyone with my jargon, but I've tried to limit it. It's a very jargon thing, and I'm a little bit of a jargon person, so please bear with me.
I was I was at a meeting a couple months ago, and I talked to a guy. This is completely unrelated to crypto, right? Like, it's just, I was there with my mom, for instance, and there was this young man who was there with his mom, and I'm like, so what do you do? He says, well, I work in zero knowledge proof, like he blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and so I was able to talk with him because of our extensive conversations. I was able to talk with him a little bit. The man was stunned that I'd even heard the terminology, and of course I can't, I can't wait. I can wade out to the middle of the pool, but not in the deep end where you guys are. But it was it was a lot of fun. And I agree with you that you have broken this down in a way that people can understand. So one of my questions is Bitcoin increases artificially the complexity of solving the problems, of sort of the blockchain, right? Putting it out there, just to make it harder to create a lottery for the miners. And this has had externalities. Some people would call positive, some they would call negative. But Psi, does it increase the difficulty of solving transactions? Because these zero knowledge proofs make it very easy. How's it work? Because it is a proof of work blockchain.
That's actually a really great question. So one of the
That's what I do for a living, Carter.
Yeah, I know. You're a pro. Hopefully I can give you a response as solid as your question. But yeah, Psi is rather unique in that while it is a proof of work blockchain, we don't have that like difficulty adjustment system. So instead, the amount of work or the work that you're actually doing for the blockchain is you're taking all those proofs and compressing them up, right? So you're essentially taking, let's say we have 1 million people, each which did some transactions. We're going to have 1 million proofs. If every single node has to verify all 1 million of those proofs, even if it's pretty fast to verify a proof, it's going to take a while, right? So what we instead do to mine Psi tokens is we pay people with Psi tokens. You get to create Psi tokens by taking those proofs and then compressing them into a smaller proof or aggregating them into a smaller proof. And by doing that, you're taking 1 million proofs and you're compressing them into one single proof, which you can verify super quickly. And that makes, that does the useful function for the network of making it really easy for anyone to verify all the transactions really quickly. So we call it proof of useful work, since the work that you're doing is directly useful to the network. You're taking the transactions and aggregating them up. And also, if, let's say we have, 10 miners today mining Psi. And let's say you have 10 miners mining Bitcoin. If you double the amount of hash power, the amount of Bitcoin that's created is going to, stay the same, of course. And the number of transactions that you can process in one Bitcoin block also stays the same, right? So with like Bitcoin and other proof of work coins, the more miners you add to the network, the only thing that you change is the amount of hash power you need to like mine a Bitcoin, right? Adding more servers doesn't make the network more scalable or allow it to, benefit more people. But with Psi, because the work that they're doing is compressing up these proofs, the more of these compressors that we have, right, the more transactions that we can process in the network. The main thing with Psi is the more miners there are, the more users can use it at once. The more miners you have, the more scalable it becomes. When we talk about like the internet, with normal websites, the way that, let's say your Facebook, you want to be able to support, you currently support 100 million users, you want to support 1 billion users, you add more servers, right? You can't do that with Bitcoin because the way that Bitcoin works is the block size doesn't depend on the number of people processing it, right? But with Psi, the more people that you have aggregating these proofs, doing this useful work, the less time it takes to compress all of the transactions into one proof, which means you can add more transactions and still have the same block time. So with Psi, like we can build internet scale applications by just, scaling up the number of miners that we have, proportional to the number of users. So this is something that's very unique. Like there's no other blockchain that has this property. And it means that we can build internet scale applications that still like preserve decentralization without like weird trade-offs where it's like, oh, we're going to build this Web3 app that can support millions of users at once, but it's only running on my node, right? And I can see everyone's transactions, but other people can't, and I can double spend if I want, right? So like, it's not one of those chains. The security doesn't depend on the scale, and that's why you mentioned, I'm guessing you mentioned before, that trilemma of like, scalability, decentralization, and security. It's like, we're kind of able to navigate that and make those trade-offs go away.
That's what Vitalik Buterin called the impossible triangle. Could you mention it again? So it's scalability.
Kind of like 4 things. It's like scalability, decentralization, censorship resistance, which is an important and oft forgotten one, and then security. But I'm pretty sure that the triangle is scalability, decentralization, and security. But I think censorship resistance perhaps it should be a square. Because we all know that even if you have 100,000 Bitcoins, well, maybe that's a lot. Maybe if you have 1,000 Bitcoins, if no one will ever let you spend them, then they're worthless, right?
If they were given to you by a drug boss and the U.S. government,
no.
then the U.S. government says you can't spend them, then you're not going anywhere, right?
That's true. But of course, we hope that people will not do that. And, frankly, one of the other
I meant the Bitcoin. No one would ever do that with Psy.
But one of the other cool things about Psy is, like, you can build these things where, like, you can show that you're not Kim Jong-un without having to reveal your private information. So you can do, like, basic, compliance, show you're not on, like, you're not on the Iran blacklist. And you can do that by proving locally on your own machine that you're not on that list without having to reveal your identity to a third party. So, like, you can prove that you're not, like, an evil person or someone that is sanctioned without having to, like, broadcast to everyone what you're doing or reveal your identity to anyone, which is also something that's kind of only possible on Psy. Because I think, like, one of the big reasons, and this is just a practical fact of, like, our society and, the sort of norms that people have is, like, well, I'm a privacy purist. A lot of the reason why we don't see more adoption of things like Monero and Zcash is because people are like, well, what if it's an evil person, right? What if it's, Al Qaeda, right? Or I don't know if that exists.
Whatever.
What if it's one of those ones, right? Kim Jong-un. What if it's Kim Jong-un's cousin, right? We wouldn't want that. We don't, I don't want Kim Jong-un to, like, have more nukes. That's probably not good, right? But I don't think that that's a good rationale to mean that everyone has, no privacy in their lives, right? We're sort of jumping the horse a little bit there. And with Psy, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. And, like, those people that have always used, like, entity lists and, money laundering, these kinds of things as an excuse to prevent privacy. Well, on Psy, you can prevent it, right? But you don't have to compromise your privacy either. So you can build those compliant privacy applications where, the government basically can be happy that you're not Kim Jong-un, but you don't have to tell the government who you are, who you're sending money to, and how much it is. So everyone's happy, and we get adoption of privacy technologies. And again, I'm a purist, but, like, frankly, the utility of something is, like, a function of, like, how good it is, and then, like, how many people you can reach, right? And so if there's, like, this artificial weight that's making it so that you can't give people privacy, and that weight is that, people are worried about Kim Jong-un or the fire alarm, it might be Kim Jong-un sending you missiles right now, right? You don't want to give Kim Jong-un money. So
what am I going to do
if you're not giving Kim Jong-un money without revealing the recipient? And I think that's cool. Now, of course, Psy is fully programmable, so you can do what you want. But, I think these sort of, like, compliant privacy things will be able to give 99.9% of people the privacy they want without any compromise. So it's not like, oh, you just give your data to a trusted third party, and then the NSA can spy on you and when you go to buy a coffee, right? And then you prove you're not Kim Jong-un. No, your data never leaves your machine, and the NSA can't say anything. They can't say anything because, again, you're playing within their rules, and, we're not sending money to El Chapo. So, yeah.
Yeah, for one, when the United States government created Tor, they didn't care whether or not good guys or bad guys could get privacy. They just wanted it for themselves, and it got released, right?
Or so backdoor, and that's exactly what they wanted. We don't know, right? It could be, maybe.
And when I think about Psy, I think one of the most important things is right now is you guys in private beta. This isn't even out yet. You guys did 500,000 transactions per second. Often, privacy is traded for speed. And at this point, you're doing more transactions than pretty much any cryptocurrency out there. I mean, there's probably something out there that has done more transactions than you have before you even release the product. But there's not many.
I don't know of any.
I don't know of any either.
I would even venture to say that during that period on our testnet, we did more transactions than all of the other blockchains combined. I'm 100% confident that that's the case, actually. So that was nice. Now, it was very expensive because, with Psy, you prove your transactions locally, right? So we had to spin up a whole lot of machines to prove those transactions, right?
Right.
And a whole lot of miners. So that costs like $30,000. thank you, Google Cloud, for giving us the quota. And we hope that Google Cloud is grateful for our $30,000 contribution to whatever they are up to.
Well, they're probably only concerned with when you're going to do it next.
I'm sure they would love to do it soon.
They're reaching out.
Probably will hold off. I think we were okay with the result that we got. We were actually trying to go for a mill, but we kind of misconfigured like 40% of the servers. So we kind of that would have been a better headline, right? A mill would have been cooler, but hey, 500,000 transactions per second. That's like, in what is it? 60 seconds. So we're looking at something like in 15 minutes, the whole population of the United States could have done a transaction, or like within one Bitcoin block. If we were, sustaining that TPS, everyone in America could have done a transaction on Sai. So,
incredible.
So, it's good enough. Right.
It's really great. And you can always celebrate getting to public beta by doing that million transactions.
Good.
And the fact
or
that
we
you
could buy like a used Corvette, right? So it's, that's a tough one.
Is there a theoretical limit to how many transactions could go into Sai?
No. So like basically, what does transactions per second even mean? Well, it's the number of transactions that you can do in a block divided by your block time, right? So our block time is log 2 of n, where n is the number of users that send transactions in a block. So basically, the block time, as you add more transactions, it does get longer. So like for just a little bit of context, for a normal blockchain, for every transaction you add, it adds a little bit of time to process, right?
Yep.
So generally, like the TPS that you get is like kind of, the more transactions you add, it scales linearly with your block time. It means in the slope of that line is your TPS, right? So it scales linearly. So it kind of doesn't really work. But with Sai, because it's log n, the curve looks more like this, right? So like as you add more transactions, let's say to double, you can double the amount of transactions. So to go from 1 million transactions to go to 2 million transactions only takes like 0.1 second longer. And to go from 2 million transactions to go to 4 million transactions, it takes another 0.1 second longer. And to go from 4 million to 8 million takes another 0.1 second longer. So it's like to double it takes a standard amount of time instead of adding one, which means, and as you know, like when we went from 1 million to 2 million, we added 1 million transactions of capacity and we added 0.1 seconds to the block time, right? But when we went from 4 million to 8 million, we added 4 million transactions to the block and we added 0.1 seconds to the block time. So you see how you can just keep adding servers and your TPS can just go up pretty much forever. It's, by the way, the same reason why, Facebook can just keep adding more servers. It's because you're distributing the work that's done to create the block to the servers. So like, because all the servers are just, aggregating proofs, one server doesn't have to aggregate the proofs of another. They just have to check like the result of the other server. And yeah, so that's kind of the magic of what you call horizontal scaling of, or mathematically O of log n block times.
Yeah, I was so impressed, and I'm delighted to be part of the Sai team, and I can't wait. How long before we can expect some kind of announcement or
Very
something?
Soon.
Very soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
1 to 2 months.
1 to 2 months. Perfect.
Yeah.
And
now, you'll be able to use it. We'll have some bridges. There'll be mining. There may not be a token then because we just kind of want to get it out there. But yeah, I would stay tuned for that. Hopefully, I can be on the show again when we do the launch. If you'll have me.
You just need to send me an appointment. The question I have is, what can people do now? Now, it's exciting, and I've been excited for some time. What can people do now? Because I've been talking about it, and that's about what I can do. That's what I do anyway. Even if it was out, I'd just talk. But what can the listener do at this point?
So I would say follow us on X or join our Discord. Certainly in our Discord, we will be very soon be giving out like private invites. In fact, we already have some developers that are building smart contracts. So if you're interested in building on Sai, hit us up and you can start going now. Because like we do have a public test net. It's just that no one, except for the people that we tell, have the SDK or the URL for it. So if you'd like to join, or you're interested in building, let us know, and we can kind of just send that to you, and you can get going.
Semi-public testnet.
Well, it's public, but it's unlisted, right?
So tell me how to identify the Discord. If somebody goes to discord.com.
Discord.com/psy.xyz, and you click the little Discord icon. I think our short link might have changed recently, but yes.
psy.xyz. That's the URL. And there's a Discord link right there.
And for our X, we are always looking for new X followers, and we post some interesting things. There are some graphics, which we're working on the quality of, and hopefully we'll have some other interesting media there as well.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it, Carter.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, big fan of the show, and hope to come on again soon.
psy.xyz. It's Mark Edge. I want to talk about salt lending. If you have cryptocurrency, you want to access the value of that cryptocurrency without selling it. You go to Salt Lending. They have cold storage vaults, and you can put your crypto in there and take a loan out against it. And you don't have to pay tax on it. That's a little tax loophole that the billionaires use, and you can use it too. I've worked with them for years and recommend them heartily. Email me at salt@markedge.org. Email me at salt@markedge.org, and I'll start you in the process. If you want to access the value in your Bitcoin, in your cryptocurrency, you can email me first, and we'll get you started.
If you're looking for work, you know what I mean by elevator speech. It's the short version, saying just enough to make the listener want to listen more. Even if you're not a job seeker, effective communication skills have never been more important, with money and attention so scarce now. So to cut through the clutter, choose every single word as though it was the last word the person you're speaking to will hear. Otherwise, it might be. Instead of saying, due to the fact that, say, because. And avoid mispronunciations. Say jewelry, not jewelry, which could offend. Undoubtedly, you don't want to say undoubtedly. And whatever you do, never use a preposition to end a sentence with. Just kidding. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
Coming up next after the news, Hour 1 of the latest episode of Free Talk Live, here at listen.freetalklive.com.